Story 1.
I caught my wife cheating during a girls' night out. She claims it was innocent, but I have doubts. My partner and I have been married for almost 8 years, and we've been together for about 13 years. Our story began when I started dating her during her first year of grad school. I was completely attracted to her, no doubt about it. Interestingly, we were quite different. I'm introverted, outspoken, straightforward, and not exactly a charmer. On the other hand, she's very outgoing, easily influenced by others' opinions, and has a lot of energy. Initially, I didn't think she was shallow or fixated on others' opinions, but my perspective has changed over time. Early in our relationship, I found out that my future wife had a wild past. Many of her friends were people she had been physically close to, and she had a history of making out with almost every male friend she had. At that time, I thought, well, she's a young woman in college, so this is probably normal behavior. I never considered myself the jealous type and hadn't really experienced jealousy before, but that would change dramatically. In the first week of our relationship, she asked me not to call or visit her because her close friend Paul was coming to town and staying at her place. She wanted some alone time with someone she could relate to. I tried not to overthink it. Just because he was a guy didn't necessarily mean anything, right, however. This memory stuck with me because I would encounter Paul frequently, and I learned that my future wife, who I'll call Camila, had a romantic past with him. Moreover, their interactions in front of me were often intriguing. Camila's stories were inconsistent, making it difficult to piece together the whole picture. According to her, she and Paul had mutual crushes while she was dating her first boyfriend. She claims to have had many partners, but only one boyfriend. The timeline of this relationship varies depending on her account. Sometimes she says they dated from her junior year of high school until her sophomore year of college, while other times she says they broke up during her freshman year of college. She has mentioned that she used him, the boyfriend, after they split, and their relationship was on and off. She also said that she and Paul acted like a couple at one point, but then he slept with one of her friends, although later she admitted that she had betrayed him first. I suspect she might have been involved with Paul while her boyfriend thought they were still together. I'm sharing this because I wonder if this pattern of behavior has repeated itself in our relationship. During the first 2 years of our dating, we went to bars quite often. Camila was a self-proclaimed flirt and would often flirt with others, even in front of me. Not only did she flirt openly, but she also discussed her past experiences with former partners in great detail, often with me present. Besides Paul, she had an ongoing friends with benefits relationship with a guy I'll call James. As it turns out, James is genuinely a good person, and we're still friends today. However, back then, I couldn't stand him. He would regularly talk about his close moments with Camila, even in front of both of us. It's tough to hear someone from your partner's past describe details. During those initial couple of years, several things bothered me. I'd often see her deeply engaged in conversation with someone new, not even bothering to greet me. She'd frequently find herself surrounded by a group of guys, making it impossible for me to chat with her for hours on end. Whenever Paul was around, he'd always sit as close to her as possible, and they'd be practically glued together. As he played video games, she'd serve him a bowl of MJ, even lighting it for him. She'd constantly interrupt me to pay attention to Paul's words. For a while, Paul was involved with our downstairs neighbor, but he'd always make a point to visit Camila first. Once, her best friend came to see her, and she didn't want me around so she could have one time with her friend, a female schoolmate. However, she ended up inviting her close buddy Michael and 4 other people. She repeated this on a night that was meant to be just for the girls. I wasn't allowed to call or drop by, yet she invited 4 guys excluding me to join their girls' night. I tried my best to let these things slide, but they became increasingly difficult to overlook. My anxiety and insecurity grew. I want to mention that I have a daughter, and I see her every other weekend. I went through a period of unemployment when finding a job was tough, and I fell behind on child support payments due to a recession. During this time, Camila was interning, and I tried to stay in touch with her. Sadly, she seemed uninterested when I called, often chatting with her friends. One incident that really affected me was when I had to go to court for falling behind on payments. I narrowly avoided jail by making a deal with my daughter's mother. I had just gotten a job and needed 2 weeks to gather over $2,000, so I was stressed and had to borrow money. When I called Camila for support, she was not only disinterested, but also busy eating Chipotle and chatting with her friends. There was no concern or empathy. A few weeks later, she went on a trip to an amusement park with her internship colleagues. Once again, she didn't want me to join, but I found out that others brought their partners. As I mentioned, these things add up and become hard to forget. She even attended a Christmas party with Paul, where she admitted he was flirting with her. Fast forward a year, she moves back home, and we talked about moving in together. I received a small inheritance, allowing us to find a place, and I secured a job in her area. Finally, after almost and a half years of ignoring her thoughtless behavior, I confronted her about how much her flirting upset me. She recounted an incident at a local bar in my absence. In her narrative, she informed the bartender that she would consider getting involved if she were single. My discomfort was evident when I responded to her tale. In reaction, she erupted in anger, vehemently denying ever making such a statement despite having just recounted it to me. It dawned on me that Camila struggled to cope with criticism of her character and would react with intense fury when challenged. Simultaneously, Paul sent her a late-night text that I happened to observe, which read, "When do I get to see that fine backside again?" As time passed, things improved. We formed a tight-knit group of friends, and my daughter and Camila grew closer. We had very few arguments, and everything was fantastic. Our circle of friends fell apart after about 3 years, but Camila and I got engaged. Things remained pretty good between me, Camila, my daughter, and our friendship with Carl and Lola. A few years later, we got married, with Carl officiating the ceremony. Another year passed and things took a dark turn. Lola discovered Carl's infidelity, leading to their divorce. Naturally, Lola sought comfort from Camila, but then came an unexpected twist. Lola embraced her midlife crisis, going out to bars and pursuing men like there was no tomorrow. The odd thing was that she insisted on taking my wife with her almost every other night as her wingwoman. During this period, my job required me to work long hours, sometimes from 3 p.m. to 7 a.m., 3 to 4 times a week. While I was at work, my wife was out socializing with guys. Her interest in being close with me was at an all-time low. She often claimed it was because she was tired, but she had plenty of energy for going out. On a certain occasion, she shared an incident where a bouncer flirted with her, and a bartender, encouraging the interaction, remarked that she must be there looking for something. During this event, I noticed her friendly connection with the bartender, whom we'll call Bob, on a visit to the bar together. On the night of her birthday celebration at the venue, she initiated a tight hug with him, almost leaping in his direction, despite her later claim that he had hugged her. Her high level of intoxication that night led to her falling flat on her face before reaching the bar. I, on the other hand, remained relatively sober throughout the evening. When I discussed this incident with one of Camila's friends and simply mentioned Camila and Bob, the friend had an emotional outburst, which seemed particularly suspicious to me. Later, an individual acquainted with my wife who had hosted a party she attended unexpectedly showed up at my workplace. Upon learning my address, he asked if I knew Camila and her boyfriend Bob. Although it could be attributed to a possible mistake, the coincidence did not escape my notice. Moreover, there was a prevailing joke at the bar insinuating that Bob might be lacking in one aspect but compensated in others. Later, Camila confided in me about her dissatisfaction with a partner who was not well endowed, recounting a previous encounter with a man who was small but good at other things. While I recognized the potential for overthinking, a sense of uncertainty continues to persist in my thoughts. During this time, another strange thing happened. Camila and I had absolutely no physical contact for 2 months. Closeness had been an issue for years, but we still had occasional moments of closeness. During this period, there was nothing. Strangely, Camila missed her period for a month and feared she might be pregnant. I couldn't help but wonder why she thought that was possible if she was only sleeping with me. When I brought it up, Camila predictably lost her temper. After this, she started taking birth control, but our bed life remained stagnant. Around this time, we attended a family wedding. I remember that after the wedding, she was tipsy and began talking about going dipping in the hotel pool. My dad and brothers went to bed, and so did I. I had been awake for at least 24 hours due to work. She ended up going with my cousin's husband while I lay down. I woke up 2 hours later, and she wasn't there. She was back by morning, but she claimed they didn't go dipping, and that she returned right away, which I know isn't true. Later, Camila went to Lola's house for a pool day, taking my daughter with her. One of our acquaintances, let's call him Keith, was there. Camila told me that Keith and Lola were quite drunk, and Keith flirted with her in front of my daughter. When I mentioned this later, Camila got upset because she was worried I would anger Lola and others who were there. It was then that I realized my wife cared more about the opinions of her social circle than mine. Eventually, the frequent outings, including on my days off without me, stopped when Lola met someone new and remarried. After that, Camila hardly ever heard from Lola. To be completely honest, I began emotionally distancing myself and even trying to numb myself to the idea of my wife being with someone else. I even tried to make myself indifferent to closeness. All of this was causing me anxiety. I started having panic attacks, which she began to notice, the distancing, not the panic attacks. I told her about one I had while at her cousin's place during a Super Bowl party break. I had another one at my previous job, which resulted in me being sent to the hospital with extremely high blood pressure. I blacked out. Fast forward to the recent past. From 2020 until now, a lot has happened. I lost my job, went on unemployment, had my unemployment revoked, putting me in debt. I was accused of endangering someone at work, went to court, and ended up on probation. I spiraled into depression and anxiety, feeling paralyzed. I didn't even want to leave the house. I became short-tempered and unmotivated, all during the pandemic. Meanwhile, Camila started a new career and, being the extrovert she is, struggled with being cooped up indoors. Before the pandemic escalated, Camila traveled to Florida for work training. One night, she visited a Caribbean club and was chased by one of the guests. Oddly, the chef came out to tell her how stunning she was. I found this strange because if the chef was in the back, how would he know to come out and compliment a random person's appearance? Maybe I'm overthinking it. Anyway, she called me once that night saying, "These guys are really making me want to smoke, MJ." She called again, supposedly on her way home, when an unfamiliar voice started yelling into the phone. It was so loud that the person must have had their mouth right next to the receiver. She called back and told me it was the guy who pursued her. He was an Uber driver and had pulled over across the street to offer her a ride. That's what she told me while intoxicated. Sober, she claimed she bumped into him in person as she left the club, but that night she said she was already outside walking home. Both of us started therapy. As her departure approached, Camila consistently stayed at work later. She attributed it to her workload, yet she had no problem leaving on time for social events like dinners, ball games, and other outings. I once went with her to a friend's house from work, remaining sober throughout. At one point, they became close, holding hands and gazing into each other's eyes. I'm sure of what I saw. This friend was a female coworker who already had a boyfriend. Camila began dedicating more time to working out and enhancing her appearance. She started coming home progressively later. I worked the 1 a.m. to 10 a.m. shift, and she often arrived home when I had only 4 to 5 hours left. One day, she attended a 5-hour book club when we hadn't seen each other, returning just when I needed to sleep. Any attempt to discuss it resulted in anger and yelling. When I vented, I faced criticism and harsh scolding, while she expected me to just listen, which I mostly did. However, there were times when my frustration boiled over, and I snapped. Never physically, I would never damage her. The only topics she seemed interested in discussing were her fitness goals and her job. Her increasing criticism made me more silent and frustrated. All the frustration came to a head in a single incident 2 years earlier. I became my daughter's primary guardian as her mom moved to Texas. Well, her mother waited until the last minute to book a flight, and the only days that didn't conflict with our work schedules were on weekends, particularly her schedule. Apparently, my daughter's mother couldn't find a direct weekend flight. Camila found out about this and decided to contact her. Honestly, I didn't think it was our responsibility to arrange the flight. In fact, the custody agreement states that she's responsible for scheduling and covering travel expenses to and from Texas. Camila didn't inform me about my daughter's mother's difficulty finding a weekend flight or that she had reached out. Camila also took it upon herself to agree on a midweek time to take my daughter to the airport. What she did tell me was that my daughter's mother had scheduled an early morning flight on a Wednesday. The airport is 2 hours away. She said the flight would leave by 7 a.m. at the latest, and she expected to be home by 10 a.m. at the latest. Assuming Camila had taken the day off, I was under this impression. Camila booked a hotel near the airport and asked if I wanted to join her. I had that night off, however. I hadn't slept in days, was extremely tired, and had a therapy session the next day at 11 a.m. Traffic around the airport can get heavy around 8-9 a.m., and I was worried about missing my session, which was part of my probation. Missing it could lead to a contempt of court order. In reality, the flight was leaving at 6 a.m. I wasn't told this, and Camila would be home by 8 a.m., but under the impression that she was planning to drive through heavy traffic after a 7 a.m. flight and be back by 10 a.m. at the latest, I thought it would be cutting it close. I declined to go with my wife to the hotel when she asked again. Sleep deprived and annoyed at her constant disregard for my schedule and leaving paraphernalia everywhere, I snapped at her. She left angry, returned the next morning, and still went to work. She didn't take the day off and wouldn't call in sick. That night, we talked, and she asked when we were last happy. I told her it was when she spent time with her cousin the next weekend. She mentioned something inside her broke that night, and she didn't want to pretend anymore. She stated we shouldn't be together, and when I shared how long I'd been unhappy, it broke her heart. I asked if she knew why. She said no, and I explained much of what I wrote here, though not everything. She said she was going to her parents' house for a few days, then packed more things than I thought would fit in her parents' small home. I haven't seen her since. She didn't even personally discuss our situation with my daughter after returning, leaving her devastated. I can't say for sure, but I feel there was more to this. Maybe not, though. Perhaps it was a series of unfortunate coincidences caused by our differing personalities. Still, I can't shake the feeling that there's something else. Well, believe it or not, my wife confided in her friend about her trio party with her cousin and the bouncer I mentioned earlier. It's pretty obvious there was more than just makeup involved, and if that wasn't enough, she got caught red-handed texting her other lover right before she left. I wish I could say this is all just some made-up story, but it's not. I'm beyond furious, and it's consuming my thoughts non-stop. So, I'm 38, and my wife and I separated 4 months ago because I found out she cheated on me. It really messed me up because she acted like our 13-year relationship was nothing. She even texted me 2 months ago, saying things shouldn't be abnormal just because we're not together anymore. I'm feeling pretty cynical about people in general now. Lately, I've been getting to know this amazing woman who's really kind and caring. I'm really into her, and she seems genuinely compassionate. I can tell she's interested in dating, but I'm torn. I keep wondering if it would be fair to her to pursue something while I'm still so fresh from my separation. What do you think? It's been 9 months since my wife left me, and some days I'm fine, but others are hard to deal with. She used to be sweet and loving, and we cuddled together on the couch, but now she's acting like I don't even exist, and it hurts. Even after 9 months, it's challenging to forget those contrasting moments. I wish I could just forget like she has. It's crazy that after 13 years of marriage, she could just act like it was nothing. I'm not really looking for answers, just needed to express myself. Second story, while being in bed with my wife, she called out another man's name. When I asked her about it, she said it was just a friend. When I questioned her about this mystery guy, she insisted he was just a friend. However, something didn't feel right, so I looked into it and discovered she had been messaging him. When I confronted her, she tried to downplay it, claiming it was blown out of proportion. She did admit to drinking and talking to the guy, but said it was deeper than the messages. Apparently, she got upset seeing happy couples at a party we couldn't attend due to my work schedule, knowing I'm working hard to pay our bills and save for our future. According to my wife, she spotted her colleague James smoking, and suddenly felt a strong urge to join him. While I don't mind her smoking, it's legal where we live. It's unusual since she's not a smoker. I can't help but wonder why she decided to strike up a conversation with him. She confessed to sharing her frustrations about our closeness with James. Closeness takes a back seat due to my demanding work schedule, and when it happens, it's standard, as she's unwell and I'm not that adventurous. James then asked her to join him upstairs. She got up to go, claiming she didn't intend anything inappropriate but wanted a private chat, then felt dizzy and began to fall. As she narrated her story, I sensed gaps in her tale. She admitted James caught her when she almost fell, but suddenly they were kissing. That didn't sit well with me. According to her, she felt guilty after a few seconds and told him she wasn't comfortable. I raised an eyebrow at her timeline, but she quickly corrected herself, saying it was only a few seconds, not minutes, as she initially claimed. I'm unsure if I believe her. She explained feeling uncomfortable staying in the same room with James, so she found the homeowner and asked to lay down in a locked room with the purses. It didn't make sense to me. Why not just leave the party if she felt uncomfortable? She said she didn't want to leave because her friend, who was her ride, wasn't ready to go yet. Instead, she asked the homeowner to arrange someone to pick her up when her friend was leaving. The more she spoke, the more I realized her story had holes. Despite that, I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt for now and pressed for more details. Supposedly, that's where the whole thing ended, and anything else this guy is saying is nonsense. Currently waiting for her friend's response to confirm if she was in that room at the end of the night, but I wouldn't put it past her girl power friends to cover for her. I told her I wanted to believe her version of events, and if it was just a kiss, I could forgive it, even though it made me feel sick and betrayed. But something about the story didn't add up, like why she didn't want to report it to her bosses at work. To protect her own reputation, I understand, but it still made me suspicious. It's not that I think she's a liar or a cheat, but I need some time to process everything. I didn't even know we had problems in our marriage serious enough for her to confide in a stranger about them. I suggested to her that we go to couples counseling. She already sees a therapist on her own, but I'm not sure what they discuss because she's not very open about it. She told me that she thinks couples counseling could help us, especially since most of her sessions with her current therapist revolve around her nightmares, panic attacks, and fear of passing. It's been almost a year since she started seeing that therapist, and she still wakes up in the middle of the night crying. I let her know that I needed some time to think. It might sound a bit dramatic, but I took a sheet and hung it up in the living room to create a little private space behind it, where I set up my computer. I just need to be alone with my thoughts for a while. I'll give it a day or two to let everything sink in, and then I'll talk to her again after her appointment on Thursday. I don't know how long it'll take me to get over this, but every time I look at her, all I can think of is her vulnerable and wide-eyed in someone else's arms, and it just hurts. My mind's a mess, and I'm considering finding a therapist for myself, someone who can help me cope with the imminent loss of my wife, the love of my life. I'm barricaded in the living room, hiding behind a makeshift sheet barrier with my computer on the couch. It feels a bit like a child playing fort, but this is the only thing that feels right to me at the moment. She attempted to talk to me to get me to come out from my hiding place, but I just couldn't face her. I need time to process all of this, to sort out my emotions, and figure out what to do next. I'm lost, desperate for some guidance. If anyone out there can offer any help, any advice, I would be grateful beyond measure. Around 7 p.m., I left the house and walked aimlessly until I found myself in front of the liquor store. I ended up buying an average-sized bottle of tequila, and before I knew it, I had consumed a significant amount. Drinking isn't my usual go-to, and being slim, I quickly felt the effects of the drinks. By 9 p.m., I stumbled back home and tried to confront her. I was angry and intoxicated, and in a moment of rage, I gave her a gentle shove. Surprisingly, she responded by telling me to do it again, claiming that she wanted me to be mad. So I gave her another push, and she tried to kiss and touch me, leading to us engaging in some acts. The situation was consensual, but I wasn't comfortable with it. I only went along because it had been so long since she showed any interest. About 25 minutes into the act, she said the name James. I asked her what was going on, and she looked at me and said, "I guess he made me say it so much I forgot. I'm currently secluded in my own little world. Tomorrow I plan to tell her to leave. I know I'll be all right without her, and she'll be fine without me." I was abruptly awakened at 4 a.m. by a strong smell of marijuana in the apartment. My mind was foggy, but I had a sinking feeling that something was wrong. I stumbled towards the bedroom, hoping against hope that my wife hadn't been foolish enough to bring that man back to our home. However, as I entered the room, I found that most of her things, including her medications, clothes, TV, and computer, were gone. I desperately hoped that she had packed up and left on her own accord, but deep down, I knew that the reality was far from that. I went to the apartment office when it opened and asked to change the locks. She wasn't on the lease, and I wouldn't tolerate her showing up unannounced to cause trouble. The office agreed, and I felt relieved knowing she couldn't just come in anymore. I texted her saying she could get her stuff with her brothers or a friend, but that guy wasn't allowed in my apartment. Her response, the laughing so hard you're crying emoji. Typical, I can't deal with her immaturity right now. I headed to the apartment office early to discuss changing the locks. I explained she wasn't on the lease, and I didn't want any trouble if she came back to cause problems. Later, I texted her, telling her to bring her brothers or a friend when picking up her things, but the guy wasn't welcome. Her response was the laughing so hard you're crying emoji. It's like she doesn't grasp the seriousness, making me question if she's taking this seriously at all. Reflecting on last night, I wonder if she's having some kind of breakdown. Everything seemed deliberate. It doesn't make sense to say someone's full name during closeness unless you're weird or trying to make sure your boyfriend knows you said someone else's name, not just a misunderstanding. I called my boss, and surprisingly, he supported my decision, advising me to take some time off to clear my head. He even gave me a few days off, assuring me my job would be waiting when I'm ready to return. It's been months since I've had 2 consecutive days off, let alone 4. Going back to a life that doesn't revolve around her will be a challenge. I'm not even sure if I remember how to have fun anymore, but I'm optimistic about finding my way back to happiness. I've got to say, the fun was a smart move. It's almost entirely my hard-earned cash, maybe even all of it, but I'm not letting that go to waste. If things go smoothly and she collects her things without a fuss, I plan to give her around $1,500 as a parting gift. After all, it was meant for her, right? But the rest of that sweet stash is all mine, baby. I might even treat myself to a little getaway using some of my vacation time to leave all this drama behind and live a little. I'm not really worried about her. She's posted some vague messages on social media about how she thought her loved ones would be there for her during tough times. It's already filled with likes, sad emojis, and comments like, "Message me, girl," so she's getting all the support she needs. My mind is still reeling, and I'm trying to process everything that's happened. It may sound a bit over the top, but I'm seriously considering seeking counseling. I feel hurt and violated, and I don't think I can come to terms with it all.
Story 2.
My alpha husband hasn't forgiven my affair with the grandfather and took his revenge on us. I'm John, and my wife is Grace. We're both 34 years old. I'm not overweight, but I could shed a few pounds, and I've always considered myself reasonably good-looking. During my college days, I had a few girlfriends and had no trouble attracting women. But everything changed when I met my future wife in my freshman year. We exclusively dated until the question of marriage came up, and 7 months later she became my wife. She had many admirers in college and always drew attention from guys. Her presence could instantly light up any room, radiating energy. People admired her playful personality. I believed we were the ideal couple because we loved spending time together. However, the challenge we faced was not having enough time for each other. I work as a systems analyst at a large IT company, and she is a registered nurse in the orthopedic department of a major hospital. My typical work week involves 9-hour days, 6 days a week, and sometimes I have to stay late when dealing with complex or time-sensitive issues. Due to our demanding work schedules, we can only spend time together on weekends. When Grace works the daytime shift, we only see each other in the evenings. However, she's always exhausted and goes to bed around 10, shortly after getting home. To make up for our lack of closeness during the week, we often talk about our fantasies. We both believe these fantasies should stay as just that, fantasies. She meant everything to me, and she assured me that I was the love of her life. I have no time for infidelity, and she knows how strongly I feel about it. I simply wouldn't tolerate it. Grace works 4 days a week, each shift lasting 13 hours. She alternates between Monday and Thursday and changes shifts every 4 weeks. Shifts typically run from 7 to 8, either during the day or night. Additionally, there's a shift change period that takes about an hour, so she usually gets home around 9:30 in the morning and evening. I've been urging her for the past 2 years to find a permanent job, but she's passionate about what she does and doesn't want to switch careers, so we've learned to cope with her unconventional work hours. When we first got married, we both had student loans. We agreed to pay them off before starting a family. Once the loans were settled, we decided to delay having children until we were comfortably settled in a nice home and neighborhood. 3 years ago, we achieved that goal and decided it was time for her to become pregnant, but she didn't. Today is Monday, and I left work early, thinking I had the flu. I texted my wife, telling her I was going home sick. She replied, advising me to take flu medicine. I asked her which medicine and where to find it. She responded, Tamiflu, and mentioned it was in the medicine container in the second drawer under her dressing table in our bathroom. I simply replied, okay, and headed home. Once I got home, I went into our main bathroom to search for her medication, but instead I found something unexpected. I checked the drawer she had pointed to but couldn't find anything labeled Tamiflu. When I opened the top drawer, I found flu medicine and a foil packet of birth control pills. She had already taken the one designated for today. I was completely stunned. She had assured me she had stopped taking the pill over 3 years ago. We had been trying to have a baby for the past 3 years without success. My wife had previously told me that our work schedules were the reason for our difficulties and that eventually, our schedules would align with her menstrual cycle. In the spring, I decided enough was enough, and both of us underwent testing. After multiple tests, our doctors stated that there was nothing wrong with either of us. I looked at the foil packet of pills and wondered if it was an old packet, but I realized that the days of the pills matched the month, and the correct pill for today had already been removed. Today is Tuesday, the 18th of the month, and 18 pills have been taken, including today's. They were set to expire in 2 years, indicating they must have been refilled recently. Simultaneously, various scenarios raced through my mind. Did Grace truly desire to start a family? Was she involved in a secret affair? Did she have undisclosed health issues? Why did she lie to me? Our bodies were aging, and the longer we delayed starting a family, the more challenging it would become. How should I approach her? I took some Tamiflu and went to bed. The next thing I knew, Grace was waking me up, asking about my well-being and if I needed anything. I felt better and declined any assistance. I couldn't help but feel uneasy that she hadn't shared anything with me, but she didn't say a word. I observed her, and it seemed like she believed I had passed out again. She undressed to take a shower, and I noticed that some parts of her body were red. It suddenly occurred to me that she might have had an affair after her shift before coming home. When she worked in the other department, her shift change used to take less than 10 minutes. Why did it now take an hour? She didn't close the bathroom door, and I positioned myself where I could see her reflection in the full-length mirror in the bathroom. It seemed like she had spent an excessive amount of time grooming herself. Was this a regular occurrence? I had no idea because I had never observed her like this before. She undressed in our bedroom, and her clothes were scattered where she had left them. I picked up her panties, and yes, they were still damp. I placed them back under her robe and returned to bed. However, I came to understand that there was a hidden side to her that I hadn't known about. I needed more details. She returned to the bedroom after her shower and climbed into bed beside me. This was an unusual time for me to be in bed. Strangely, she didn't attempt to hug or console me, and I remained on my side. By the time I woke up the next morning, she had already left. I phoned my boss and informed him that I was sick with the flu. I had some sick days saved up and needed some time off to figure things out. I reached out to one of my closest college friends, who had become a lawyer, for advice. I quickly learned that our state had no-fault divorce laws, and since we didn't have any children, we only needed to split our assets evenly. The most significant asset was our house, which had gained some equity and needed to be sold, and the proceeds divided. My friend offered to represent me if I chose to file a lawsuit, assuring me it was a straightforward case. That evening at 8 o'clock, I parked near Grace's car to follow her. We both had iPhones, so I used the Find My Phone app to check her location and saw that she was still at the orthopedic ward. After waiting for 10 minutes, I realized she was on her way, so I called the orthopedic department and requested to speak with her. I was told she had already finished her shift and left. I realized that she had deceived me about the shift change, which had lasted only 10 minutes or less. I continued monitoring the app on my phone and noticed that the blue dot representing her had stopped in an unfamiliar part of the hospital complex. I left the car and decided to locate her phone, but it proved more challenging than I'd expected. I found a place, but it was on the wrong floor. Finally, after waiting for about 20 minutes, I ended up outside one of the rooms where doctors take breaks during their long shifts. Inside, I could hear people being intimate. To find out who was in that room, I needed to hide, and luckily, I found an open janitor's closet about 50 feet away. After roughly 20 minutes, Grace left the room and headed toward the garage. A little while later, a man came out too. Eventually, he locked the door. I approached him and asked for directions, which he kindly gave. He was a bit taller than me and looked quite attractive. I checked his name tag and saw it read Dr. William. I needed a plan. I called my boss at home and told him that I had the flu, but there was also a pressing personal family matter that required my immediate attention. He understood, having gone through a tough divorce himself a year ago. He said I could take as much time as I needed, but to keep him informed so he could handle work. Next, I phoned my friend Max, who's a lawyer, and explained that I wanted to take legal action against Grace since she had left our house after our encounter on Thursday night. He agreed to help and asked if there was anything else he could do. Since I was unsure about my next steps, he suggested splitting our finances and canceling our credit cards. Did I have any plans after leaving her? Was there a place for me to go? I hadn't thought that far ahead and admitted it. Max told me to visit his office first thing the next morning. He had experience with this and had a list of tasks for me to complete. He even had a list of hotels with affordable weekly rates. My first tasks included arranging a small shipment with a transportation company to be delivered the next morning. I planned to temporarily store my belongings until I found a more permanent place to live. My next stop was the bank, where I withdrew half of our joint accounts and canceled our credit cards. I took control of the accounts in my name only and requested new credit cards. At midnight, I disconnected her cell phone. After I was legally served that evening, while I was in my computer room saving important files for the upcoming weeks, Grace arrived home on schedule at 9:30 p.m. We exchanged greetings, and she proceeded to shower and go to bed. I also retired to bed early because I had a busy day ahead. Strangely, she didn't notice when I went to bed, and I failed to realize how distant she had become. The following morning, she left the house early, and the movers arrived promptly. I had a checklist of items to take with me, and I had placed stickers on everything that needed to be packed. My car was loaded with suitcases and work-related computer gear. Once the movers finished, I went out and purchased a single black rose, symbolizing death, departure, and significant changes in the future, which in this case meant the end of our marriage. Placing it in the center of the kitchen table, I wrote a brief note that read, "Grace, as you might recall, I called you on Monday informing you I was unwell and going back home. You advised me to take Tamiflu and directed me to its location. However, I couldn't find it in your second dressing table. Instead, it was in the top drawer next to your birth control pills. Suddenly, several pieces of a significant puzzle fell into place. You weren't even trying to have a baby because you were having an affair with a doctor at work. It seems your relationship with Dr. William was more important than our marriage. And I've come to realize it's been going on since you were transferred to the orthopedics department. So many lies. How could you? I believed we had a strong marriage built on trust and love. Now my heart is shattered. I'm sure you knew that once I found out our marriage would crumble. Well, guess what? In our no-fault state, I don't need evidence of your infidelity, which, by the way, would be quite easy to obtain. I divided our accounts and took my share from the house. Have you noticed that your cell phone and credit cards aren't working anymore? By the way, you should find a new place to live because in 60 days I'll be putting the house on the market and anything left inside will be donated to Goodwill. Now you're free to do as you please." I wonder, is he married with a family? You should know his wife will find out eventually. What will the hospital say? Remember when I said I wouldn't tolerate infidelity? Consider this a heads up for what might come next in your life. Not your husband anymore, John. I'm leaving my wedding ring here. It's no longer needed. So I left the note with the ring on the table and exited the house. I checked into a hotel with a weekly rate and waited. Grace was served with divorce papers by a deputy sheriff who did such work for Frank in his free time. She apparently had a meltdown and passed out. The doctor had to come out of his room in his underwear to help her. But an hour later she called, furious, demanding to know why I had filed for divorce. I asked her why she'd even posed such a foolish question. I informed her that she'd been unfaithful to me for over 2 years, starting when she began seeing the orthopedist. She inquired about when I discovered her affair, and I explained that it was just last Monday when I stumbled upon her birth control pills while looking for Tamiflu. I heard her sigh on the phone after that. It all became quite clear. I ended the phone call. It seemed she hadn't read my letter. I didn't get much sleep, but I decided to go to work the following day. I found myself buried under a massive workload that had piled up. With nowhere to go and no one to go home to, I started working 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. Max and I spoke frequently, and one day I inquired if the doctor was married, and if so, whether there was a way to inform his wife. Max said he'd consider it. Grace was resisting the divorce, although I hadn't seen or heard from her. Her lawyer was in contact with Max. The hearing date was approaching, and I found myself in the same room as her, though she avoided making eye contact. I wore a suit with a black rose pinned to the lapel. The judge was unsympathetic and didn't favor divorce cases. Grace wanted us to undergo counseling, but Max questioned the point of it, considering her ongoing affair. I candidly informed the judge that I wouldn't participate in any court-mandated counseling. I didn't care if he threatened me with jail. In my view, my wife had been dishonest, unfaithful, and deceitful, and I had no desire to be near her. I conveyed to him that, in my opinion, I hadn't done anything wrong, and it was Grace who had broken our marriage vows, leading to the divorce. I suggested that she should be the one sent for counseling since she was the one who needed it. I was swiftly found guilty of contempt of court and fined, but I remained unfazed. I was furious, and Max had to escort me out of the courtroom before I said something that would land me in jail. He reminded me that it was just a hearing. I asked Max to check if Grace was avoiding the doctor. I intended to cause significant harm. Max hired a detective who set up a video camera in the doctor's break room and recorded their actions after work hours. Additionally, they caught her bad-mouthing me on an audio tape. Their encounters were explicit, making an X-rated movie seem mild. There was hardly any kissing or physical affection. They were purely physical partners. I inquired with Max about holding the hospital responsible now that we had video proof. He believed we couldn't use the video in court, but leaking it anonymously could tarnish the hospital's reputation and bring unwanted attention. He recommended waiting until after the divorce to send the video to the hospital administrators, the doctor's wife, our friends, and family. It was sound advice because if she got fired before the divorce was finalized, I might have to pay alimony, which I wanted to avoid. Finally, the divorce day arrived, and the judge granted it without any counseling attempts. He believed there was too much animosity, and our marriage was beyond repair. The next day, the video was leaked from an unrelated anonymous source, causing a major uproar. Grace called me and questioned why I did all of this. I reminded her that there was no proof I had leaked the video and thanked whoever did it. I also made it clear that I wouldn't tolerate infidelity, especially when it happened to my face and continued even after I filed for divorce. She had broken 2 marriages. I told her it could have been worse, and she agreed. The situation worsened when our family and friends reacted to the video the following day. Everyone supported my side and nobody had kind words for her. Everyone had believed we had a perfect marriage. That was 3 years ago, and I haven't seen or heard from Grace since then. She's been acting evasive and heavily stressed. I remarried a second time to an amazing woman, and we now have a 1-year-old daughter. My new wife desires a large family and plans to be a full-time mother, which is exactly what I've always wanted. If you're wondering what happened to Grace and William, their lives took a difficult turn. Grace attempted to communicate with me for nearly a year, although I'm not entirely sure why she tried. I didn't give her an opportunity to reconcile. Both William and Grace were abruptly terminated from their jobs. William's wife initiated divorce proceedings. Grace could have managed, but then I shared the video with our friends and family, which was the final blow for her. This led her to contemplate starting anew. Had she not contested the divorce, she might not have lost her job. Despite not wanting a divorce, Grace sought counseling. But my strong opposition led her to lose the case in court. Her second mistake was continuing her relationship with William and engaging in a romantic affair with him. I made a wise decision by waiting until our divorce was officially finalized before releasing the video. If I had done it earlier and she had lost her job, I would have been obligated to pay alimony. Eventually, Grace, feeling utterly embarrassed and humiliated, relocated to Oklahoma City and secured employment as a nurse in a doctor's office. Perhaps she's trying to rebuild her life, and I hope she's learned from her mistakes. Alright, that was a fun story. Now, let's move on to another exciting one. Stay tuned, and let's dive in. Story 2 life felt like a dream, at least that's what I believed. I'm Leonardo, and I was married to Clara, the woman I thought was the love of my life. We had a cozy home, a dog, and everything seemed absolutely perfect. Our days were brimming with laughter, tenderness, and deep understanding. Our neighborhood was calm, mostly inhabited by families and a few elderly folks, including Grandpa on the corner. Grandpa Tomas was a kind and always helpful man. He acted like a grandfather to everyone in the neighborhood, sharing stories and always wearing a warm smile. Then one day, I came home from work early, eager to surprise Clara with a romantic dinner. I was particularly excited that day, filled with plans for the evening. Our wedding anniversary was just around the corner, and I wanted to make it truly special. On my way home, I made a quick stop at the supermarket to pick up the ingredients for Clara's favorite meal. As I approached our house, I noticed something unusual. Grandpa Tomas was exiting our front door, wearing a friendly smile. He bid farewell to Clara with a loving kiss on her cheek, and when he spotted me, he waved with a slightly guilty look on his face. "Hello, Leonardo," he exclaimed, a bit out of breath. "I just shared an old cake recipe with Clara. You know how much she enjoys cooking." Clara had a smile on her face, but I detected a hint of uncertainty in her eyes, a hesitation I'd never witnessed before. "Yes, Grandpa Tomas paid me a quick visit," she added, sounding a tad uneasy. I nodded, trying to ignore the growing unease churning in my stomach. However, as I busied myself with dinner preparations, a peculiar detail caught my attention. A still warm cup of tea on the table and two chairs placed very close to each other. As though they had been engaged in a deep conversation, doubt began to creep into my thoughts. What was Grandpa doing in my house? Why did Clara appear so jittery? I attempted to dismiss these thoughts, convincing myself it was merely my imagination. Yet the look I glimpsed in Clara's eyes that day lingered in my mind, and an ominous feeling began to take root in my chest. It felt like I stood on the edge of a precipice, with an instinct pushing me toward investigation. However, what I would uncover in the days to come would prove more distressing than anything I could have imagined. On the following week's Monday, as I walked home after a typical workday, a soft song played on the radio, though I could barely hear it. My mind fixated on Clara, on that brief kiss on Grandpa's cheek, on her mysterious demeanor, and on the unsettling sensation that something was amiss. As I passed by Grandpa's house, an unsettling sight brought my heart to a sudden halt. Clara was exiting through Grandpa's gate. In that fleeting moment, my world appeared to come to a standstill. I sounded the car horn at her, attempting to conceal the storm of emotion swirling within me. She seemed taken aback for a second, then flashed a smile and made her way over to the car. "Hey there, sweetheart. What a coincidence, huh? I was just grabbing a slice of the cake from the recipe Grandpa shared the other day. He's quite fond of that cake, you know," she explained, her face radiating innocence. I tried to return the smile, but something felt amiss. Her eyes lacked their usual sparkle, and beneath her facade, there was a tension she attempted to conceal. "Sounds good, honey. I'm sure he'll appreciate it." My words flowed mechanically, my attention drawn to something on Clara's shirt sleeve, a tiny, almost imperceptible droplet. My stomach churned. She got into the car and we engaged in trivial conversation for the remainder of the drive home, but my thoughts were elsewhere. That minuscule liquid droplet, the visit to Grandpa's, the brief kiss, all these elements began to form a picture I was reluctant to acknowledge. It resembled a jigsaw puzzle with pieces that refused to fit together. Upon arriving home, Clara headed straight to the kitchen, humming a cheerful tune. I watched her, bewildered, lost in my own thoughts. She appeared unchanged, but something had undeniably shifted. I was determined to uncover the truth, regardless of how painful it might be. Dinner passed in uneasy silence, and as I retired to bed, a single question echoed relentlessly in my mind: what's really going on? I felt like I was on an irreversible path, and deep down, I knew that whatever I discovered would forever alter my life. The following morning appeared like any other, with routines seemingly back to normal. However, the suspicions that had taken root in my mind prevented me from finding any peace. I understood that I had to uncover the truth, regardless of the cost. My entire history with Clara, the years of love and trust, hung in the balance. "Today I might be a little late coming back from work, honey," I informed Clara during breakfast. "We have an important meeting with a client, possibly lasting late into the night." Clara glanced at me, mildly surprised, but nodded in understanding. "No problem, darling. I'll prepare something special for dinner. I love you. I love you." Those once reassuring words now felt hollow, like a distant echo. What was love when trust had been shattered? I left work earlier than usual, my heart racing with a blend of fear and determination. I couldn't escape the need to uncover the truth, to witness it firsthand. As I neared our home, a knot tightened in my stomach. If Clara wasn't at home, I knew precisely where to look: Grandpa's house. I didn't want to believe the thoughts taking shape in my mind, but the evidence was stacking. Up, the tiny liquid drop on her shirt, the intimate kiss on her cheek. I couldn't erase those from my memory. I parked the car at a safe distance and silently made my way to our house. It felt as though the entire world had come to a standstill, and the only thing I could hear was the sound of my own labored and unsteady breathing. Without making a single noise, I carefully opened the door to the living room. What I witnessed left me frozen in terror. There they were, Clara, my cherished wife, kneeling in front of Grandpa with his gown sitting on the couch. It was a scene etched into my memory, an unthinkable betrayal that tore my very soul apart. A surge of anger and the desire to scream and confront Grandpa coursed through me, but I restrained myself. He was frail and elderly, and any physical altercation could have dire consequences, not to mention what it would do to me. My body quivered, and tears flowed down my face uncontrollably. An intense pain gripped my chest, a pain unlike anything I had ever experienced. The image of them in that room, the room we had built together, was a betrayal that defied any words. I retreated silently, my mind swirling with a tumultuous mix of thoughts and emotions. I had unearthed the truth, but it came at a steep price. Trust had been shattered, love tarnished, and my life lay in ruins. I knew I could never look at Clara the same way again. She was no longer the woman I had adored. She had become a stranger, a betrayer who callously discarded our years together. The journey back to the car passed in a haze. I felt shattered, adrift, as if a fundamental part of me had been violently ripped away. The truth lay there, exposed and unfiltered, and I understood that everything would forever be different. However, I couldn't simply let it be. My life had been wrecked, and it seemed only fair to shatter theirs in return. They needed to face some consequences. My thoughts turned with a scheme. It was a revenge plan that needed to be as public and humiliating as possible. I aimed to reveal Clara and Grandpa's true selves in a grandiose manner. Days later, wearing a forced smile and carrying a heavy heart, I spoke with Clara, pretending to have forgiven her completely. I suggested that we commemorate our love and the obstacles we'd conquered by hosting a lavish party for our wedding anniversary. She hesitated initially, but I managed to convince her, perhaps making her think this could be a chance for redemption. I sent out invitations to all our friends in the neighborhood, neighbors, and family members. Of course, I made a special point to invite Grandpa, underscoring his significant presence. The day of the party arrived and everything was meticulously prepared. The house was adorned beautifully, the food was delectable, and our guests were joyful and eager. Grandpa was in attendance, sporting a cheerful demeanor, blissfully unaware of what lay ahead. The moment arrived, and I stood up with a raised glass, my heart racing. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice firm and self-assured. "We are gathered here not only to commemorate our love, but also to celebrate the ideals of truth, integrity, and mutual respect we should always hold for one another." Our friends and family raised their glasses, sporting smiles, but Clara and Grandpa appeared uneasy. "But before I make this toast," I continued, locking eyes with Clara and Grandpa, "I must unveil a hidden truth that none of us have known." A heavy silence engulfed the room. Grandpa's eyes widened, and Clara seemed on the verge of fainting. "Yes, dear friends," I declared, my tone now stern and unwavering. "The reality is that my beloved wife and our esteemed Grandpa, whom everyone holds in high regard, have been engaged in an illicit affair. Unbeknownst to us all, my wife and Grandpa have maintained a secretive and scandalous relationship right under our very noses." The room filled with shock and disbelief. All eyes turned to Clara and Grandpa, who appeared pale and horrified. And I believe everyone present deserves to be acquainted with the truth. Grandpa and Clara are not the individuals you believe them to be, I pressed on, my voice resolute. Because trust, respect, and integrity are the foundations we rely on, and they have been fractured. Grandpa attempted to speak, but his words were drowned in sobs. Clara, too, began to weep, her tears an admission of her disgrace. "I request a divorce, Clara," I uttered, my voice faltering for the first time, "and I hope you and Grandpa find the life you truly deserve." With that, I departed the room, leaving shock, sorrow, and a sense of betrayal in my wake. I had relinquished the love of my life, but my vengeance was fulfilled. I had laid bare the truth and humiliated Clara and Grandpa in the presence of everyone they knew. Their reputation, image, and standing in the neighborhood would never be the same. It was the least I could do. Story 3, gather round, folks, because it's time for the tale of my unfaithful ex-wife and how I dealt with the situation. Let's start from the beginning. I began to suspect her infidelity due to various warning signs she exhibited. Red flags like frequently laughing and smiling while texting, claiming it was just her mother when I inquired. Staying late at work every night and offering flimsy excuses when I called, and her colleagues insisting she had left hours ago when I questioned them. She would dismiss my concerns, chalking it up to office banter. The tipping point came when she supposedly went out to buy milk at 11:30 at night but didn't return until 2 in the morning. Now, if there's one piece of advice I can offer from my extensive experience, it's this. If you suspect your partner of infidelity, consider hiring a private investigator. They are skilled at their job and can gather evidence that proves invaluable in divorce proceedings. Let's fast forward to her birthday several months later. I can anticipate your question, why did I wait for months before confronting her, and did it have to be on her birthday? To answer the first query, I needed time to gather substantial evidence from my lawyer and make arrangements to find a new place to live. As for your second question, absolutely, it had to be on her birthday. You see, when I asked her about her birthday plans this year, she insisted I go out of town with my friends since she had to work and didn't want to dwell on aging. That raised suspicions, and when I stumbled upon a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses hidden in my closet, something inside me snapped. So, like any rational man, I pretended to leave from my friend's house, making it seem like I was going out of town. While there, I contacted her mother, father, sister, and several friends, sharing my idea of surprising her with a room filled with party streamers, kazoos, and a large cake adorned with candles. It sounded like a blast, right? Well, words might not capture the experience adequately, but I'll do my best for you. It was 8:30 in the morning, and I quietly gathered everyone just outside our apartment. We squeezed into the elevator, about 8 of us in total, with her mother carrying the cake. I reminded everyone to maintain hushed tones. I inserted my key and unlocked the door. We crept inside and made our way down the hallway toward the bedroom, each clutching a kazoo and Mom holding the cake. Her face lit up with excitement. As I flung open the bedroom door, we all shouted, "Surprise!" It turned out the surprise was actually on us. I walked in on my wife in a shocking position with her lover, who had a wide-eyed look mid-thrust. My mother dropped the cake, my sister screamed, and my father began to shout. I pretended to be horrified, and her friends attempted to usher everyone out while yelling at her. My now ex-wife was sobbing and screaming, questioning how I could, while her lover desperately tried to put on his pants and hastily exit. Right afterward, her mom was preoccupied with cleaning the cake off the ground. My sister had to physically guide her out of our apartment to stop her from cleaning. Dad initially tried chasing the guy, but eventually returned to check on everyone. He looked at me as if he wanted to say, "I'm so sorry," before taking her mom to the car. As for my lovely ex, she essentially blamed everyone in the room. She accused the parents of entering our apartment without telling her, blamed her sister for reasons I couldn't comprehend, and even pointed fingers at her friends for not disclosing the surprise. She didn't make an effort to explain herself to me. Instead, she resorted to name-calling and threw objects at me. It all felt incredibly surreal. I had expected that she would cling to me, trying to prevent my departure and apologizing profusely, similar to what one might see in movies. However, that expectation did not align with reality. I found the woman I had loved for 2 years screaming and hitting me, accusing me of ruining her relationship with another guy. It seemed she had stopped seeing me as her husband and more like a roommate. Strangely enough, it turned out to be one of the best birthday presents I've ever given in a twisted sort of way. Honestly, in the beginning, it was quite comical. I tried to mask my laughter by pretending to be choked up. After enduring so much betrayal, it felt like I finally had the upper hand and got the last laugh. Plus, thanks to the private investigator I hired, I had evidence that she used my money to fund her affair. Hotel stays, dinners, and whatnot. So I did receive some compensation, although she still walked away with half of my life savings. But considering my financial situation back then and how I've progressed since, that amount is almost laughable now. However, the reality eventually hits you. Your marriage is over, the woman you loved has betrayed you, and the last 2 years of your life feel like a bit of a waste. Ultimately, it's not about the money. I genuinely believed I loved this girl, so I couldn't help but wonder what was wrong with me and if anyone could truly love me. Additionally, I had developed a close relationship with her dad, who had taken me under his wing as a father figure, which was especially meaningful since my own father had left when I was young. I still keep in touch with him, share my achievements with him, and visit when I can. Divorce is never a pleasant experience, and my advice to young folks in love is not to rush into things. Take time to truly get to know each other. Live together for 3 to 5 years before making any big decisions. I wish someone had given me that advice and urged me to think about what I was doing. Also, the old saying about judging someone by how they treat their parents is absolutely true. She was unkind to her parents, which should have been a significant red flag. As for her, the last I heard, she had moved in with the guy, or at least I believe it was him. She got pregnant, and if they're still together, she probably has the child by now. At this point, I couldn't provide any more details. I genuinely hope she's found happiness, even if I'm not the one providing it for her. Thank you.
Story 3.
The grandfather clock in the hallway struck 8, its deep chimes resonating through the two-story suburban home like a brass bell calling faithful to prayer. John Matthews lifted his head from the laptop screen, his eyes burning from staring at financial reports since returning from the office. The house around him sat unnaturally quiet, devoid of the usual sounds of his wife's evening routine. No TV murmuring in the background, no phone conversations with friends, no soft footsteps moving between rooms that he rubbed his tired eyes, the gold wedding band on his finger catching the warm light from his desk lamp. 20 years of marriage had carved deep grooves into his life, comfortable routines that shaped his days. The dining room table had become his second office, covered in neat stacks of papers and reports. 3 empty coffee mugs forming a semicircle around his laptop like a caffeinated constellation. The kitchen beyond the dining room gleamed with unused perfection. Rebecca had always insisted on top-of-the-line appliances, though lately, they seemed more for show than function. The marble countertops reflected the recessed lighting, creating pools of brightness that emphasized the emptiness of the space. When was the last time they'd sat down to dinner together? John couldn't remember. "Rebecca," he called out, his voice carrying through the house's open floor plan. The silence that answered felt deliberate, heavy with unspoken tension. Standing from his chair, John's joints cracked in protest. At 45, he wasn't old, but long hours at the investment firm had taken their toll. He loosened his charcoal tie, the one Rebecca had given him last Christmas, and surveyed the living room as he passed through. Everything in its proper place, almost too perfect, like a model home waiting for real people to move in and make it lived in. Rebecca's phone lay on the coffee table, its presence unusual and somehow ominous. She carried that thing everywhere, constantly checking messages, scrolling through social media, maintaining her carefully curated online presence. Seeing it abandoned made the hair on the back of his neck rise. The hardwood stairs creaked under his feet as he climbed to the second floor, each step echoing in the silence. Family photos lined the stairwell wall. Their wedding day, vacation snapshots, holiday gatherings. Looking at them now, John noticed something he'd missed before. The gradual change in Rebecca's smile, from genuine joy to practiced perfection. Her eyes growing colder with each passing year. A strip of warm light spilled from beneath their bedroom door, accompanied by the soft rustle of movement inside. The scent of Rebecca's favorite perfume, Japanese cherry blossom, drifted through the air, stronger than usual. She only wore that much when she wanted something. "Rebecca," he called again. Pushing open the door, the sight that greeted him stopped him cold. Rebecca stood before their full-length mirror, her body wrapped in nothing but a black silk robe that barely reached mid-thigh. Her blonde hair cascaded over her shoulders in carefully styled waves, catching the light like spun gold. She'd done something different with her makeup. Smoky eyes, blood-red lips, the kind of effort she usually reserved for charity galas and social events. But it was her eyes that held him frozen. When she turned to face him, John saw something in them he'd never witnessed before, a cold, calculated determination that made his stomach clench. This wasn't his wife of 20 years. This was someone else entirely. "You're finally paying attention," she said, her voice carrying an edge sharp enough to draw blood. Her lips curved into a smile that didn't reach those unfamiliar eyes. John stepped fully into the room, his mind racing to process the scene before him. The bedroom, usually a shared sanctuary, felt like alien territory. Rebecca had transformed their personal space into a stage, and he had walked into a performance already in progress. The room itself betrayed careful preparation. Scented candles flickered on the dresser, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Their bed, had been made with fresh linens, the dark burgundy sheets turned down invitingly. The whole setup felt choreographed, deliberate in its sensuality. "What's going on?" he asked, keeping his voice level despite the alarm bell screaming in his head. 2 decades of marriage had taught him to read his wife's moods, but this was something entirely new. something dangerous that Rebecca's laugh held no warmth as she turned back to the mirror, adjusting her robe to reveal another inch of tan thigh. 20 years is a long time, John, she said, running her hands down her sides in a gesture that was both seductive and threatening. 20 years of being the perfect, faithful wife. Do you have any idea how many men have tried to get my attention over the years? John's jaw clenched, but he remained silent, watching her performance with increasingly wary eyes. Each movement she made seemed calculated to provoke a response, to crack his carefully maintained composure. Oh, they've been persistent, she continued, her voice taking on a dreamy quality that made his skin crawl. Executives at your firm's parties, tennis instructors at the club, even that young artist who did our portrait last summer. All of them promising to give me what you couldn't. Attention, passion, desire. She moved closer to him, her perfume now overwhelming in its intensity. I turned them all down, she practically purred. Played my role as the devoted wife while you buried yourself in work. Coming home late, barely touching me, barely seeing me. Her voice hardened. But I'm done pretending. Done suppressing what I want? What exactly are you saying? John's voice emerged low and dangerous, a tone he rarely used outside of high-stakes negotiations that Rebecca's smile widened, showing too many teeth. I'm saying that tonight, I'm going to be with someone who actually wants me. Someone who's been pursuing me for months, showing me the attention you've forgotten how to give. Someone who makes me feel alive again. The words hit John like physical blows, but years of business dealings had taught him to keep his expression neutral. 20 years of shared history, of building a life together, and she had chosen to destroy it all with theatrical cruelty. He's coming here tonight, Rebecca announced, turning back to the mirror to adjust her hair. I thought you should know, since this is your house too. Though lately it feels more like a museum of what our marriage used to be. The grandfather clock downstairs struck the quarter hour, its chime echoing through the tense silence. John stood perfectly still, his mind racing through 20 years of memories. Their first date at that Italian restaurant downtown, the nervous proposal in Central Park, their wedding day when she'd looked at him like he was her whole world. The woman before him now bore no resemblance to that bright-eyed bride who'd promised to love him forever without a word. He turned and walked out of the bedroom, his footsteps measured and controlled. The house seemed different now, transformed from a home into a battlefield. Each family photo he passed on the way to his study felt like an accusation, a reminder of what they'd lost or perhaps what they'd never really had. The study door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the decision he knew he had to make. John's study had always been his sanctuary, a place where he could think clearly and make decisions without emotional interference. The room smelled of leather and old books, a masculine contrast to the carefully decorated spaces Rebecca controlled. Here, surrounded by dark wood and memories of his father's advice about being a man of principle, John faced the reality of his situation. The painting that concealed his safe had been a wedding gift from Rebecca's parents, an abstract piece in blues and grays that Rebecca had always said reminded her of storm clouds gathering over the ocean. How appropriate that symbolism felt now. As he lifted it from its hooks with steady hands, the safe itself was a top-of-the-line model, its combination lock responding to his touch with familiar precision. He'd memorized these numbers years ago. Rebecca's birthday, the day they met, the year they married. Now each number felt like a mockery as he spun the dial inside. Past the important documents and emergency cash sat his Magnum revolver. He'd bought it 5 years ago after a series of break-ins in their neighborhood, much to Rebecca's vocal disapproval. We live in a safe area, she'd argued. We don't need guns in the house. Now he wondered if her objection had more to do with her own plans than any concern about safety. The weight of the gun felt right in his hand as he checked the chamber, fully loaded, just as he always kept it. He grabbed a box of ammunition from the back of the safe, slipping it into his pocket. The metal was cool against his palm, a solid reminder of consequences and choices. Walking back to the bedroom, John felt a strange sense of clarity. The house's silence took on a different quality now, like the calm before a storm. Each step up the stairs felt deliberate, purposeful. This wasn't the angry reaction of a betrayed husband. This was the calculated response of a man who'd been pushed too far. Rebecca was still admiring herself in the mirror when he entered, adjusting her jewelry diamond earrings he'd given her for their 15th anniversary. She turned at the sound of his footsteps, and her carefully constructed facade cracked at the sight of the gun in his hand. Fear flickered across her face, quick as lightning, but unmistakable. "What are you doing?" The confidence in her voice wavered, revealing the uncertainty beneath her bold exterior. John's face remained impassive as he spoke, his voice carrying the same deadly calm he used when closing million-dollar deals. "I want you to understand something, Rebecca. When this man arrives, this person who thinks he has the right to step into my home and take my wife, I won't hesitate to kill him." Rebecca's hand flew to her throat, fingers clutching at nothing. "You wouldn't dare. This isn't you, John. You're not." "Not what?" He cut her off. "Not the kind of man who'd defend his marriage. 20 years ago, I made a vow to protect what's mine. I've never broken a promise in my life, and I don't intend to start now. What's yours?" Rebecca's voice rose, tinged with hysteria. Her carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the flush of anger spreading across her cheeks. "I'm not your property, John. I'm a woman who's been dying inside, while you treat me like part of the furniture. Do you know how many nights I've laid awake beside you, wondering if you even remembered I was there?" John's expression didn't change as he met her gaze. "You're right. You're not my property. You're my wife, and you made vows too. If you choose to break them, that's your decision. But if this man steps foot in my house, he's made his choice as well." Rebecca's hands trembled as she pulled her robe tighter around herself, the seductive confidence of earlier crumbling in the face of his resolution. "You've become so cold," she whispered, her voice catching. "So distant. I thought you wouldn't care. I thought you'd just accept it like you accept everything else with that damn stoic silence of yours." "You thought wrong." The words came out flat, final. "You've made assumptions about me, Rebecca. About what I'd tolerate. About who I am. Tonight, you're going to learn how wrong those assumptions were." He turned and walked out of the bedroom, the gun still in his hand. "I'll be waiting downstairs. Your lover has a choice to make tonight." The grandfather clock tracked his descent with steady ticks, each step measured and deliberate. In the living room, he placed the gun on the coffee table, a promise made of blue steel and deadly intent. The house felt different now, charged with potential energy like a coiled spring waiting to release. John moved to the bar cart in the corner, another wedding gift that had seen more use in recent years than he cared to admit. The crystal decanter caught the light as he poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey, the expensive kind Rebecca had given him last Christmas. Every gift between them suddenly felt tainted, weighted with hidden meanings and unspoken accusations. Settling into his leather armchair, John held the whiskey glass against his palm, letting its coolness ground him in the moment. The living room, with its carefully chosen furniture and artfully arranged photos, felt like a stage set for the drama about to unfold. 20 years of memory surrounded him. The couch where they'd planned their future, the window seat where they'd watched countless summer storms, the mantel displaying photos of happier times upstairs. Rebecca's footsteps betrayed her nervousness. The confident seductress act had cracked, revealing the uncertainty beneath. Let her worry, he thought, taking a measured sip of whiskey. Let her understand the weight of what she was about to destroy. The sound of heels on hardwood announced her descent. She appeared in the living room doorway, still wearing the silk robe, but now fully adorned with jewelry. The diamond earrings, a tennis bracelet from their 10th anniversary, the sapphire pendant he'd given her after closing his biggest deal. Each piece felt like a deliberate choice, selected to remind him of what he was about to lose. "This is insane," she said, her voice shakier than before. The candlelight from upstairs had been replaced by harsh reality, and she looked less certain in the living room's unforgiving brightness. "You need to put that gun away before someone gets hurt." John took another slow sip of whiskey, letting the silence stretch between them. "The only person who might get hurt tonight is the man who thinks he can walk into my house and take what isn't his. Stop talking about me like I'm your possession." Rebecca's voice rose, echoing off the high ceilings. "I'm a person with needs and desires. Needs you've ignored for years while you buried yourself in work. When was the last time you really looked at me, and saw more than just an obligation? If you were unhappy, John replied, his voice steady, you could have talked to me. We could have gone to counseling, worked on our issues. Instead, you chose to invite another man into our bed. Rebecca's face flushed with anger and something else, perhaps the first glimmer of shame. Talk to you? When? Between your endless meetings and late nights at the office? You barely look at me anymore, John. When was the last time you actually saw me as a woman instead of just your wife? Being my wife used to mean something to you, John said, taking another sip. The whiskey burned less now, numbed by the cold rage in his chest. It used to be enough. Well, it's not anymore. Rebecca's voice cracked, raw emotion breaking through her carefully constructed facade. I need more than your stoic silence and occasional gifts. I need passion, desire, someone who makes me feel alive. Someone who the buzz of John's phone cut through her words like a knife. Rebecca flinched at the sound, her hand instinctively reaching for her own phone before remembering she'd left it upstairs. The mask of confidence slipped further, revealing naked fear beneath. Your lover? John asked, though he already knew the answer. The silence that followed was answer enough. Tell him to come in when he arrives. I want to have a conversation with him. Rebecca's manufactured bravado crumbled further. This isn't like you, John. You're not violent. You're not the kind of man who... You don't know what kind of man I am anymore. John cut her off, his voice carrying an edge that made her step back. You made that clear upstairs. You think 20 years of marriage have made me weak, incapable of action. Tonight, you're going to learn how wrong you are. The sound of a car pulling into their driveway cut through the tension. Rebecca's breath caught in her throat as headlights swept across the living room windows, illuminating John's face for a moment. His expression remained unchanged, but his eyes had taken on a dangerous glint that made her step back involuntarily. Last chance, he said quietly, setting down his whiskey glass. Send him away, and we can talk about this like the married couple we're supposed to be. Rebecca's hand trembled as she pulled out her phone, its screen casting a blue glow across her face. For a long moment, she stared at it, her thumb hovering over the keys. John watched her, seeing the battle play out across her features. 20 years of marriage weighing against whatever promises of passion and excitement this other man had offered. Then her jaw set, and that same cold determination he'd seen upstairs returned to her eyes. No, she said, squaring her shoulders. I'm done living half a life. If you want to stop this, you'll have to do it yourself. John nodded once, as if she'd confirmed something he already knew. He set his whiskey glass down with deliberate care and picked up the gun, its weight familiar in his hand. The metal caught the light, a deadly promise made manifest. The doorbell rang, its cheerful chime absurdly out of place in the tension-filled room. Well then, he said, rising from his chair with fluid grace that belied his earlier weariness. Let's go meet the man who thinks he can destroy 20 years of marriage in one night. Rebecca watched him walk to the door, her face a mixture of fear and defiance. The grandfather clock struck 9, its chimes echoing through the house like a funeral toll. In the silence that followed, John reached for the door handle, his grip on the gun steady and sure, the moment stretched like a wire pulled too tight, waiting to snap. Through the frosted glass panels flanking the door, a man's silhouette was visible, tall, younger than John, shifting his weight nervously from foot to foot. John's finger rested alongside the trigger guard, not on the trigger itself, a deliberate choice that spoke of control rather than impulse. Rebecca stood frozen in the living room doorway, her earlier bravado replaced by the dawning realization of what she had set in motion. The silk robe that had seemed so seductive upstairs now looked painfully inadequate, like costume jewelry trying to pass for diamonds. With one fluid motion, John opened the door to face the man who had dared to covet his wife, 20 years of marriage hanging in the balance. The night air rushed in, carrying with it the scent of approaching rain and the promise of violence. The man on the doorstep stood a few inches taller than John, maybe mid-30s, wearing an expensive charcoal suit that screamed corporate success. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his clean-shaven face handsome in a generic way. The kind of man who was used to getting what he wanted with a smile and a smooth word. That smile faltered when he saw the gun in John's hand. "Mr. Matthews," he said, trying to maintain his composure. "I'm Brian Porter." "Come in, Brian." John's voice carried the same calm authority he used in board meetings. He stepped aside, keeping the gun visible but not directly threatening. "We have some things to discuss." Brian's eyes darted past John to Rebecca, who stood frozen in the living room doorway. Her face had lost all color, the seductive confidence from earlier replaced by naked fear. Maybe this isn't." Brian started to back away, but John's voice cut him off. "Either come inside so we can talk like men, or run away now and never contact my wife again. Your choice, but make it quickly." A muscle twitched in Brian's jaw. He glanced at Rebecca again, then squared his shoulders and stepped inside. John closed the door behind him with a soft click that somehow sounded more threatening than a slam. "Living room," John directed, gesturing with his free hand. "Have a seat." Brian moved into the room, his expensive Italian shoes silent on the hardwood floors. He chose the armchair farthest from John's position, perching on the edge like a man ready to bolt. "Rebecca," John said without taking his eyes off Brian, "why don't you sit down as well? Since you arranged this little meeting, you should be part of the conversation." Rebecca moved to the couch, pulling her silk robe tighter around herself. The seductive outfit that had seemed so powerful upstairs now made her look vulnerable, out of place in the harsh reality of the situation. "Now then," John said, remaining standing. He placed the gun on the coffee table, within easy reach, but no longer in his hand. "Let's talk about why you think you have the right to come into my home and try to take my wife." "Look, Mr. Matthews," Brian's voice carried a slight tremor despite his attempt at confidence. "This isn't what you think. Rebecca and you what?" John's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Go ahead, Brian. Tell me about your relationship with my wife of 20 years. Tell me how you justified pursuing a married woman. I'm curious to hear your rationalization." Brian shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "She told me things weren't good between you, that you were distant, that you didn't appreciate her anymore, and that made it okay." John's laugh held no humor. "Tell me, Brian, do you make a habit of sleeping with other men's wives? Or is my wife special?" "John!" Rebecca's voice cracked with tension. "Don't talk about me like I'm not here." "Oh, I haven't forgotten you're here," John replied, his eyes still fixed on Brian. "I just want to understand the man you chose to destroy our marriage for." "So, Brian, answer the question. How many other marriages have you broken up?" Brian's face flushed red. "It's not like that. I care about Rebecca. We connected on a level that..." "Connected?" John's voice remained deadly calm. "You mean at the gym where you work as a trainer? Or was it during those private sessions you started scheduling with my wife?" Both Brian and Rebecca stared at him in shock. "Did you think I didn't know?" John continued, settling into his own chair with deliberate casualness. "That I wouldn't notice the extra charges on our credit card? The late-night text messages? The sudden interest in fitness? You knew." Rebecca's voice was barely a whisper. "All this time you knew?" "I knew something was happening," John replied. "I didn't know you'd take it this far. I didn't think you'd actually invite your lover into our home, into our bed." He turned his attention back to Brian. "So tell me, what was the plan? Sleep with my wife in my house. Then what? Take her away to some fairy tale life where everything would be perfect." Brian straightened in his chair, finding a spark of defiance. "At least I make her feel wanted. When was the last time you showed her any real attention? Any passion?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. John's expression didn't change, but his eyes took on a dangerous glint. "You think because you've known my wife for a few months, you understand our marriage?" John's voice was soft, almost gentle. 20 years of history, of building a life together, and you think you can judge it based on whatever stories Rebecca told you to justify her actions? He leaned forward, and Brian instinctively pressed back into his chair. "Let me tell you what I understand about you, Brian. You're a predator who targets vulnerable women, makes them feel special with empty compliments and promises, then moves on when things get complicated. How close am I?" "That's not true," Rebecca interjected, but her voice lacked conviction. "Brian loves me. He understands me in a way you never did." "Love?" John's laugh was sharp and cold. Is that what you call it? Tell me, Brian, do you love Rebecca enough to face the consequences of your actions? Or were you hoping to have your fun and slip away when things got difficult? Brian's silence spoke volumes. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the room's cool temperature, his earlier confidence evaporating under John's steady gaze. Nothing to say? John pressed, his voice carrying the weight of controlled rage. No declarations of love? No promises about giving Rebecca a better life? I didn't come here to be interrogated, Brian finally managed, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair. Rebecca made her choice. She doesn't want this marriage anymore. John's smile never reached his eyes. And you think you know what Rebecca wants based on a few months of stolen moments? Tell me, what are your plans for her? Have you thought beyond tonight's adventure? We've discussed our future, Brian said, attempting to sound confident. I have a condo downtown. A rental, John cut in that new development on 5th Street. Nice place, but hardly the lifestyle Rebecca's accustomed to. What else? Going to support her on a personal trainer's salary. Rebecca stood abruptly, her face flushed with anger. Stop it. You're trying to make him sound inadequate because he doesn't have your money? At least Brian makes me feel alive. When was the last time you did that? John turned to face his wife, his expression unchanged. Feeling alive is a poor substitute for building a life, Rebecca. But please, tell me more about this wonderful future you've planned. Will Brian be taking you to the charity galas you love so much? Buying you designer dresses? Supporting your tennis club membership? It's not about money. Rebecca's voice cracked. It's about feeling wanted, desired, appreciated. And you, John turned back to Brian. You're ready to provide all that? Ready to wake up every morning and prove yourself worthy of destroying a 20-year marriage? Brian shifted uncomfortably. Look, Mr. Matthews, I understand you're angry. Angry? John's laugh was cold enough to freeze the air between them. No, Brian, I'm not angry. I'm disappointed. Disappointed that my wife chose such an amateur for her grand gesture of rebellion. He stood, moving to the bar cart with deliberate steps. The clink of crystal against crystal filled the tense silence as he poured another whiskey. Tell me, what exactly attracted you to my wife? Was it her beauty? Her vulnerability? Or was it the challenge of seducing a wealthy man's wife? You don't know anything about our relationship, Brian protested, but his voice wavered. I know more than you think. John turned, glass in hand. I know about the late-night texts, the training sessions that ran long, the coffee meetings that turned into lunch dates. I know how you worked to gain her trust, to make her feel special and understood. Rebecca's face paled. You were spying on me? I was protecting my interests, John corrected. Something every successful man learns to do. The question is, Brian, what are you protecting? What do you have to offer besides empty promises and stolen moments? Brian stood suddenly, his face red with anger or embarrassment, perhaps both. I don't have to listen to this. Rebecca, let's go. Sit down. John's voice carried such authority that Brian found himself obeying before he could think. We're not finished here. The grandfather clock ticked away the heavy seconds. Outside, a distant roll of thunder promised an approaching storm. Rebecca, John said without looking at her, why don't you tell Brian about the life you're leaving behind? About the house in the Hamptons you love so much? The weekly spa appointments? The charity board positions that mean so much to you? Stop it, Rebecca whispered, but John continued. Tell him about your mother's medical bills that I pay without question. The college fund for your niece. The yearly trips to Europe you can't live without. I said stop it. Rebecca's voice rose to a shout. You're making it sound like I'm some kind of gold digger. No, John replied calmly. I'm making it sound like you're someone who's taken a very comfortable life for granted. Someone who's about to trade certainty for promises made in the heat of passion. He moved to stand between them, his presence commanding the room. So here's what's going to happen. Brian, you're going to walk out that door and never contact my wife again. You're going to find a new gym, a new hunting ground for your particular talents. And you're going to remember this night every time you think about pursuing another man's wife. And if I don't? Brian challenged, but his voice lacked conviction that John's smile was terrifying in its calmness. Then we'll find out if you're willing to die for a few months of stolen kisses and secret text messages. The threat hung in the air like smoke, heavy and suffocating. Brian's face had lost all color. His earlier bravado completely evaporated under John's unwavering stare. "You wouldn't," Brian managed, but his voice betrayed his uncertainty. "You're bluffing. You wouldn't throw away your life over this." John picked up the magnum from the coffee table, checking the chamber with practiced ease. 20 years of marriage. 2 decades of building a life together. And you think I wouldn't defend that? He closed the chamber with a decisive click. "You clearly don't understand what marriage means to a man of principle." "John, please." Rebecca's voice trembled. "Put the gun away. This has gone too far. Too far." John's laugh held no warmth. "You invited your lover into our home, into the bed we've shared for 20 years, and you think this has gone too far? No, Rebecca. This is exactly where it needs to go." Thunder rolled outside, closer now. Rain began to patter against the windows, nature providing a soundtrack to the drama unfolding in the living room. "I made a mistake," Brian said, raising his hands in surrender. "I'll leave. You'll never hear from me again." "A mistake?" John's voice was deadly quiet. "Pursuing a married woman wasn't a mistake, Brian. It was a choice. Every text message, every private training session, every lie you told, those were choices. Now you get to face the consequences of those choices." Rebecca moved between them, her robe catching the lamplight. "John, listen to me. If you do this, you'll destroy everything. Your career, your reputation, everything you've worked for. Everything we've worked for," John corrected her. "Or have you forgotten that too? Forgotten how we built this life together? How we struggled through those early years when I was just starting at the firm?" "I haven't forgotten," Rebecca whispered, tears threatening to spill from her eyes. "But we've grown apart. You became obsessed with work, with success, with providing the life you wanted," John cut in. "The life you're so eager to throw away for this." He gestured at Brian with contempt, this imitation of passion. Brian stood slowly, his hands still raised. "Mr. Matthews, you're right. I was out of line. I should never have." The sharp crack of the gunshot cut through his words. The bullet struck the wall inches from Brian's head, sending plaster dust raining down on his expensive suit. Rebecca screamed, stumbling backward into an end table. The lamp crashed to the floor, shattering in a spray of ceramic and light. "Sit down." John's voice hadn't changed, still carrying that same deadly calm. Brian collapsed back into the chair, shaking visibly now. "The next shot won't miss," John continued, the gun steady in his hand. "Now let's try this again. Tell me why you thought you had the right to destroy my marriage." I didn't," Brian stammered, sweat running down his face. "Rebecca said things weren't good between you. Said she was lonely, neglected. You thought you'd play the hero," John finished for him. "Sweep in and rescue the neglected wife from her cold, workaholic husband. Did it make you feel powerful, Brian? Make you feel like a real man seducing another man's wife?" "John, stop," Rebecca pleaded. "This isn't you. You're not violent, not cruel. You don't know me anymore, Rebecca. That's what you said upstairs, remember? You thought 20 years had made me weak, incapable of action. Well, now you're seeing action. Now you're seeing exactly what I'm capable of." Another crack of thunder shook the windows. The storm had arrived in full force now, rain lashing against the glass in angry sheets. "Please," Brian's voice had lost all pretense of dignity. "I'll leave. I'll quit my job, move away. Whatever you want. What I want." John's finger caressed the trigger. "What I want is my wife to honor her vows. What I want is men like you to understand that actions have consequences. What I want is, I'll end it." Rebecca burst out. "I'll break it off with him. Just please put the gun down." John turned to look at his wife. Really look at her, for the first time since this confrontation began. Her makeup was streaked with tears, her carefully styled hair falling in disarray around her face. The seductive confidence from earlier had been stripped away, leaving behind something raw and frightened. "It's already ended," John said quietly. "The moment you invited him here, you ended everything. Our marriage, our trust, our future, all of it gone, because you couldn't be content with the life we built." He turned back to Brian. who had shrunk further into the chair. "Stand up." Brian hesitated, then slowly rose to his feet. "Walk to the door," John commanded. "If you ever come near my wife again, if you ever so much as think about her, the next shot won't be a warning. Do you understand?" Brian nodded frantically, backing toward the door on shaking legs. His hand fumbled with the knob for a moment before he managed to wrench it open. The storm's fury rushed in, wind and rain spattering the entryway floor. "Run," John said simply. Brian ran, the door slammed behind him, leaving John and Rebecca alone with the sound of the rain and their broken marriage. The storm raged outside, but inside the house, a different kind of tempest was brewing. Rebecca stood in the middle of the living room, her silk robe clinging to her body like a second skin, watching as John methodically checked the wall where his warning shot had struck. "You could have killed him," she said, her voice barely audible over the rain, that John's fingers traced the bullet hole in the plaster, his touch almost gentle. "If I wanted to kill him, he'd be dead." He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "But death would have been too easy. I wanted him to live with the memory of tonight. I wanted him to understand the consequences of his actions." "And what about my actions?" Rebecca's voice cracked. "Are you going to punish me too?" "Punish you?" John's laugh was hollow. "You've punished yourself more thoroughly than I ever could. Look around you, Rebecca. Look at what you've thrown away." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the room in harsh white light. The broken lamp lay scattered across the floor, its shards catching the light like fallen stars. On the walls, their wedding photos seemed to mock them, frozen moments of happiness that now felt like relics from another life. "I never meant for it to go this far," Rebecca whispered, wrapping her arms around herself. "I just wanted to feel something again, to know that I was still desirable, still alive. And did it work?" John's voice carried no emotion. "Did destroying our marriage make you feel alive? Did watching another man run away in terror give you the excitement you were looking for?" Rebecca sank onto the couch, her carefully constructed facade crumbling completely. "You don't understand. All these years, watching you pour yourself into work, coming home late, barely touching me, I felt like I was fading away, becoming invisible. So you decided to make yourself visible by inviting your lover into our bed." John moved to the bar cart, but this time he didn't pour a drink. Instead, he stood there, running his finger along the crystal decanter's edge. "Tell me something, Rebecca. When did you stop loving me?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with 20 years of shared history. "I didn't," she said finally, tears streaming down her face. "That's what makes this so horrible. I never stopped loving you. I stopped feeling loved by you. And that justifies betrayal?" John turned to face her, his eyes hard. "That makes it okay to throw away 2 decades of marriage?" "No." Rebecca stood abruptly, her voice rising. "Nothing justifies what I did. Is that what you want to hear? That I'm a horrible person? That I destroyed everything because I was weak and selfish? What I want," John said quietly, "is to understand how the woman I married, the woman who stood before God and our families and promised to love me forever, could become someone capable of this level of betrayal." Rebecca moved toward him, her hand outstretched. "John, please. We can fix this. We can go to counseling, work on our problems." "Stop." The single word carried enough force to freeze her in place. "There is no fixing this. You didn't make a mistake, Rebecca. You made a series of calculated decisions. You chose to pursue an affair. You chose to bring him here. You chose to destroy everything we built together. I was wrong." The words burst from her like a dam breaking. "I see that now. When you pulled out that gun, when I saw what this was doing to you, I realized how stupid and selfish I've been. Please, John, 20 years has to mean something." "It meant everything," John replied, his voice soft but implacable. "That's why there's no coming back from this. You didn't just betray our marriage vows. You deliberately orchestrated this entire evening to cause maximum pain. You wanted to hurt me, to prove you had power over me." "No," Rebecca protested, but her voice lacked conviction. You wanted to punish me for working too hard, for not giving you enough attention." John's words cut through her excuses like a knife. So you decided to bring your lover into our home, into our bed, to show me what I'd been missing. Tell me, Rebecca, how did that work out for you? Rebecca collapsed back onto the couch, her makeup completely ruined by tears. The sophisticated image she'd crafted earlier in the evening now a mockery of itself. I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered. I just wanted you to fight for me. Fight for you. John's voice remained steady, but his knuckles whitened around the crystal decanter. You wanted me to prove my love by competing with a gym trainer who specialized in seducing lonely housewives? That's not fair, Rebecca protested. Brian and I, don't say his name in this house again. The words came out like ice. Don't pretend what you had with him was anything more than a pathetic attempt to feel young and desired again. Lightning flashed outside, followed immediately by a thunderclap that rattled the windows. The storm had reached its peak, matching the tension in the room. You want to know what really happened tonight, Rebecca? John set the decanter down with deliberate care. You thought you knew me. Thought 20 years of marriage had made me predictable, safe. You expected me to either accept your betrayal quietly or throw a jealous tantrum that would justify your actions. He moved to the fireplace, picking up a framed photo of their wedding day. Instead, you discovered that you never really knew me at all. That the man you dismissed as cold and passive was actually someone who would fight to defend what's his not with childish displays of emotion, but with calculated, decisive action. I know you now, Rebecca said, her voice trembling. I see the real you, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, John. Please, can't we try to fix this? John placed the wedding photo face down on the mantel. Tell me something, Rebecca. If I hadn't been home tonight, if I hadn't confronted you and your lover, would you be apologizing now? Or would you be in our bed with him, laughing about how easily you deceived your boring, workaholic husband? The silence that followed was answer enough. John, Rebecca tried again, rising from the couch on unsteady legs. Everything I did tonight was wrong. I see that now. But 20 years of marriage, surely that's worth fighting for. Our marriage died the moment you invited another man into our bed. John's voice carried the finality of a judge passing sentence. What you're seeing now isn't a fight to save our marriage. It's the consequences of your choices playing out exactly as they should. Rebecca moved toward him, reaching for his arm. We can start over. Go to counseling. Rebuild trust. John stepped away from her touch as if it burned. There is no starting over, Rebecca. You didn't just make a mistake. You didn't have a moment of weakness. You orchestrated an elaborate betrayal, planned it down to the last detail, chose the maximum amount of cruelty. I wasn't thinking clearly. Rebecca's voice rose in desperation. I was caught up in the excitement, the attention. The attention, John cut her off. Always about attention with you. Tell me, did you get enough attention tonight? Did watching your lover run away in terror, while I held a gun to his head, give you the excitement you were craving? Rebecca flinched as if he'd struck her. You're being cruel. No, John replied calmly. I'm being honest. Something you might want to try sometime. He walked to the window, watching the storm rage outside. The rain traced patterns on the glass, distorting the view of their perfectly manicured lawn and the expensive cars in the driveway, all the trappings of the life they'd built together. Do you remember what my father told us at our wedding? He asked, his voice distant. He said marriage isn't about romance or passion. It's about choice. Every day, you choose your spouse again. Every day, you choose to honor your vows, to put your marriage first. I remember, Rebecca whispered. Tonight, you made your choice. John turned back to face her. You chose to break those vows in the most devastating way possible. You chose to invite another man into our home, into our bed, into the life we built together. And now you're choosing to throw everything away. Rebecca's voice cracked. 20 years of marriage just gone? No, Rebecca. John's voice was gentle, but implacable. You threw it away. I'm just acknowledging what you've already destroyed. Thunder rolled outside as John moved toward the stairs, his footsteps heavy with purpose. Rebecca watched him, panic rising in her throat. Where are you going? Her voice trembled with fear. To pack a bag, John replied without turning. I'll be staying at the peninsula tonight. I suggest you use this time to think about your next steps. You're leaving? Rebecca hurried after him, her bare feet silent on the hardwood floors. Just like that? 20 years of marriage, and you're walking away. John stopped at the foot of the stairs, turning to face her with dangerous calm. Did you expect me to stay? To sleep in that bed where you planned to betray me? To pretend this night never happened? I expected you to fight for us. The words burst from her like an accusation. Fight for us? John's laugh was cold enough to freeze the air between them. You invited another man into our home, into our bed, and you expected me to beg you to stay? To compete for your affection like some lovesick teenager? At least I would have shown you cared. Rebecca's voice cracked with desperation. Instead, you're walking away, cool and controlled like always. Like our marriage means nothing. Our marriage meant everything to me. John's voice carried the weight of 2 decades of shared history. That's why there's no coming back from this. You didn't just have an affair, Rebecca. You deliberately orchestrated this entire evening to cause maximum pain, to prove you had power over me. That's not true. But even as she protested, Rebecca heard the hollow ring of denial in her voice. Isn't it? John's eyes bore into hers. You chose to tell me about your lover instead of sneaking around. You chose to wear that robe, to make a show of your betrayal. You wanted to hurt me, to shake my control, to make me feel as powerless as you claimed to feel. Rebecca sank onto the bottom step, her robe falling open to reveal the lingerie she'd chosen for another man. I just wanted to feel something, she whispered, to break through your wall of perfect control, to make you see me again. I never stopped seeing you, John replied, his voice softening for a moment. I saw every change, every sign of your growing dissatisfaction. I saw the way you started dressing differently for your gym sessions, the way you checked your phone more often, the secret smiles when you thought I wasn't looking. Then why didn't you say anything? Rebecca looked up at him, mascara streaking her cheeks. Why didn't you confront me? Because I trusted you. The simple words fell between them like stones. I trusted that 20 years of marriage meant something to you, that our vows were more than just words. John turned and climbed the stairs, leaving Rebecca huddled on the bottom step. She listened to his movements. Above, drawers opening, hangers sliding on rods, the quiet efficiency of a man who'd made his decision. When he returned 10 minutes later, a leather overnight bag in his hand, Rebecca hadn't moved. She watched as he collected his laptop from the dining room table, methodically unplugging cords and storing them in their proper places. What happens now? She asked, her voice small in the storm-filled silence. Now. John paused in his methodical packing. Now you get to live with your choices. My lawyer will contact you tomorrow with divorce papers. I suggest you find representation quickly. Divorce? The words seemed to echo through the house. Just like that? No counseling, no second chances? Second chances are for mistakes, Rebecca. What you did tonight wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. A series of choices, each one designed to destroy what we built together. He moved to the gun, still lying on the coffee table, checking the chamber before returning it to its case with practiced care. The click of the case, closing, sounded like a door being locked forever. The house is yours until the divorce is settled, he continued, his voice businesslike now. I'll have my assistant collect the rest of my things tomorrow. I suggest you use this time to think carefully about what you want from the settlement. 20 years of marriage deserves at least the pretense of dignity in its ending. Rebecca stood, swaying slightly. So that's it? 20 years erased in one night. No, John replied, picking up his bag. 20 years ended by your choices. By your decision to throw away everything we built together for a few moments of excitement with a man who ran at the first sign of consequences. He moved to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. The storm had begun to ease outside, the thunder more distant now. I want you to understand something, Rebecca. This isn't a negotiation. This isn't a punishment you can wait out. This is the end of our marriage, clean and final. I still love you, Rebecca whispered to his back. John didn't turn around. No, Rebecca. You love the idea of me, the successful husband you could control and manipulate. Tonight proved you never really knew me at all. He opened the door, letting in the smell of rain and ozone. Goodbye, Rebecca. I hope whatever you were looking for tonight was worth the price you'll pay for it. The door closed behind him with quiet finality. Rebecca stood in the silence of their ruined marriage, listening to his car start in the driveway. As the sound of his engine faded into the storm, she sank to the floor, surrounded by the wreckage of 20 years of love and trust. The grandfather clock struck midnight, its chimes echoing through the empty house. In the morning, she would have to face the consequences of her choices. But for now, she sat alone in the darkness, watching the rain wash away the last traces of the life she'd so carelessly destroyed.
Story 4.
I sat motionless, feeling trapped as my wife of 25 years explained the reasons behind serving me divorce papers. I struggled to fully comprehend her words. She noticed my distraction and asked if I was present. I apologized, admitting I had zoned out. She reiterated the terms of the divorce, emphasizing their clarity and non-negotiability. She insisted I keep the house, cars, and all the money in the bank. She urged me to sign, assuring me the process would be finalized in 3 months. Speechless, I reflected on our life together. Marcy and I had been together since high school, raising our twin daughters, Cindy and Sandy, who went off to Columbia University. We had a cozy suburban home, both drove Volvos, and Marcy had her own credit cards and phone. I never denied her anything, never strayed or mistreated her. She never seemed discontented or voiced any grievances. This blindsided me. Perhaps that was the issue. I hadn't paid enough attention. I get the mechanics of divorce, Marcy, but can you at least explain why? It might be too late to change anything, but I want to understand. Marcy slouched into a kitchen chair, clearly avoiding the conversation, hoping I'd just sign and let her go. Give me something, Marcy. What did I do? You didn't do anything, Alan. You were perfect. Sometimes I wished you'd slip up so I'd have a reason to leave, but you never did. You did a great job with the kids and put them through college. You always gave me what I wanted, even when I was difficult. You got us a nice house. My folks love you. Don't think you're at fault because you're not. She appeared about 45, with flawless skin and perfectly styled light brown hair gleaming in the sunlight. She jogged often, maintaining a toned physique and tan. Weekdays found her casually dressed, but she could glam up when she chose. Marcy thought she was as perfect as me, or so she said. I couldn't fathom what was truly happening. I'm sorry, but this doesn't add up. There has to be a reason. You can't just brush it off like that. There's more to it. Alan, I'm trying to spare your feelings and save face. Let's leave it at that. No, Alan, I found someone else. He's a real estate developer with a swanky apartment overlooking the river and a sleek black Mercedes. He's attractive, wealthy, and head over heels for me. You've always been, and still are, a grocery store clerk. I'm not knocking your job. You've always provided and made us comfortable, but you'll always be a clerk. I wanted more. I never saw you strive for more. It hurt. Even though I managed the grocery department, she still saw me as just a clerk. When offered a chance to advance and move away, I declined to keep our family together. Look how that ended up. It stung, but I didn't think it was worth mentioning. Does this wealthy, good-looking guy have a name? Clayton Manning. He's the president of Keystone Development Company. How long have you known him? 6 months. Did you sleep with him? Marcy sat up straight in her chair. Her eyes scanned the room before locking onto mine. Yes, I've been avoiding this, but since you insist, yes, we were still married. Yes, I cheated on you. I was unfaithful. Are you satisfied now? I sat for a moment, then reached for the divorce papers, signing them in 3 places, initialing 2, and passing them to her across the table. I think he's better suited for you. Sorry to disappoint. I rose and left the room. As I exited, Marcy yelled, No, that's not why. He wasn't better than you, just different. Don't you dare believe that, Alan. Don't you dare. By then, I was out the door. I was so engrossed in my work and hobbies that I didn't even notice Marcy gradually moving her things out of the house. By the time she handed me the papers, she had already relocated most of her clothes and personal belongings to Clayton's apartment. She left behind all the wedding and family photos so I could enjoy them while she was gone. Upon returning home, she was nowhere to be found. Her Volvo remained in the driveway, and I assumed she wouldn't need it anymore. On the kitchen table, she had left a power of attorney to sell the house and car. I spent the rest of the night disposing of the beer in the refrigerator. By then, I realized there was no turning back, and I didn't want to either. Marcy was gone and would be gone the next morning. I contacted work and took 3 months of overdue vacation. They had been urging me to take time off, so there was no issue. I had plenty of vacation and sick leave. I quickly called the girls at school and briefly explained that we were parting ways, but refused to divulge more details. They wanted to call Marcy, but I didn't have her new phone number. With 3 months ahead to gather myself and figure out my next steps, I disconnected my landline, changed my cell phone number, and canceled the one Marcy had. The Volvo dealer assessed the low book value of Marcy's car. I had a high school friend, Terry, who was now a real estate broker. He agreed to sell the house without listing it at a low price and with a quick settlement. As a precaution, I canceled all my credit cards and opened new bank accounts. I cashed in my life insurance policies. It was time to get things in order. I went through the house and collected everything that might belong to my wife. There was enough stuff to fill 3 trash bags. I packed the girls' personal belongings into boxes and stored them in the closet next to the house. I spent 3 hours sorting through family photos, putting all the girls' pictures in a box for them. All of Marcy's pictures went into the trash can. It might have been foolish, but I didn't care. The primary issue I faced was a lack of direction. I had no idea what I would do after 3 months. Would I stay here or leave? Would I continue working or seek something new? I had 2 hobbies. I mainly collected coins, especially those with an Indian head on them. They were easy to collect and readily available. I bought and sold them on eBay and enjoyed it. My other passion was geocaching. It gave me an excuse to get outside and exercise. Marcy hated this activity because of ticks, poison ivy, and walking. I didn't see how I could make a living doing any of these activities. When I wasn't occupied with my hobbies, I devoted time to reading the Wall Street Journal. Cindy and Sandy gifted me a subscription every Christmas. While I had no interest in stocks and bonds, I absorbed everything related to farm commodities. I possessed more knowledge about sugar, wheat, and corn than most market analysts. However, it remained merely a hobby as I had no investments in it. My research extended to Keystone Development and Clayton Manning. Terry Davis unearthed more information about Clayton and his latest project than I could ever manage, delving into details with a friend at a local bank. I eagerly awaited his findings. Weeks passed without any sign of Marcy. The girls called weekly, but their mom remained silent. I felt their support, yet they still had to show loyalty to their mother. Holding a few yard sales, I cleared out many items, leaving enough furniture to maintain the house's appeal to potential buyers. Marcy and Clayton's photo appeared in the society section of the Sunday paper, attending a political rally with local dignitaries. After a couple more weeks, Terry presented a lowball offer on the house, well below its appraisal, but with a 60-day closing, which suited me. He had intriguing information about Clayton and proposed a lunch meeting. I figured I needed a break from the house and accepted. Hayes Mountain stood out as a prime location for hiking and geocaching. Although I'd already found all the geocaches there, 3 landmarks remained to be discovered. Landmarks, metal rods set in concrete, scattered across the country, aiding surveyors and real estate professionals in delineating property lines. Locating these landmarks was akin to a bonus quest for dedicated geocachers. Today, I resolved to track down all 3 landmarks on the mountain, equipped with my GPS and a metal detector. Hayes Mountain, nearly 2,000 acres in size, mostly belonged to the Madison Land Trust, which relied on donations to preserve its expanse amidst encroaching urban development. Adjacent to the trust's parking area, an orchard and farmhouse were up for sale, marked by a prominent sign. As I parked, I wandered over to the orchard fence, feeling a pang of sadness at the prospect of this picturesque site succumbing to development. "Are you considering buying it or just enjoying the view?" came a voice from behind. I turned to see an elderly man approaching, dressed in overalls and a John Deere cap. I chuckled. "If I had $1 million, I'd snatch it up in a heartbeat," I replied. He grinned back. "Do you think you'll have any trouble selling it?" he asked. "Well, I've got some interested parties, but I'm holding out as long as I can," I replied. "Why's that?" I inquired. "I was hoping the land trusts would acquire it, but they're short on cash. They want to preserve the fruit trees as they are, but the developers want to bulldoze everything," he said. "I think it'd be a real asset to the area," I remarked. But how can the trust compete with those big companies? He explained. I've offered them a good deal, even though it's listed for $1 million. I'm willing to let them have it for $600,000, but they're struggling to gather the cash in time, he replied. If they can't, then that real estate guy gets his hands on it, he grumbled. He's been pestering me every week. An option isn't a sure thing, right? I asked. Nope, he said. He pays $100,000 for the option to buy it later for $1 million. If he can't come up with the cash, he loses that money. It's a good deal for me, but I don't want him to succeed, he added. He's got the funds locked up, so he's in the clear. The problem is, he needs all 6 properties for the deal to go through. That's why he's offering more than it's worth. What if you don't sell him the option? I inquired. He'll be in serious trouble, the old man chuckled. If he doesn't get that lot, the whole deal falls apart and he loses everything. He's invested maybe $1 million. His backers will bail and you'll be left high and dry. I'd help you out if I could, I said sympathetically. Appreciate it, he replied, sounding somewhat resigned. They all say that. We shared another laugh, and I set off on my walk. His mention of Keystone caught my attention. The landmarks were about a mile apart, at least as the crow flies. But on the mountain, it felt more like 2 miles. Locating the first 2 markers was easy. They were typical surveyor's markers, but the third one? That was a different story. It was older, harder to find, buried under years of forest debris. When I finally stumbled upon it, I discovered a small brick monument with a bronze plaque attached. It was concealed beneath layers of leaves and dirt. I snapped a picture, thinking it might be worth sharing in a magazine. And then everything changed. As I moved away from the marker, my metal detector started beeping. It was faint, but it was definitely there. I slipped on my headphones and began scanning the nearby area. After some poking around, I unearthed a small iron box wrapped in oil-soaked canvas. It was rusty but sturdy, with a heavy bronze lock. Normally, discoveries like this on public land are considered treasures and handed over to the authorities. But for some reason, that didn't feel right to me. So I tucked the box into my bag and headed home. On the way back, I couldn't stop wondering about the contents of my little discovery. Gold coins, historic documents from the Civil War. The possibilities were endless, limited only by the size of the container. Back at home, I cleared the kitchen table and carefully inspected my discovery. I hesitated to damage the lock, but seeing no other way in, I reluctantly decided to use my bolt cutter. Inside the box, beneath another layer of oiled canvas, lay a dozen pennies. But these were no ordinary pennies. They were large cents dating as far back as 1793. Surprisingly, they were in excellent condition, showing no signs of green corrosion. Although I typically favored Indian head pennies for their value, I recalled a book my grandfather left me titled The Quirks of the Penny, which explored various types and varieties of large cents. I found the book dull as I didn't possess any of the coins it described. Yet tonight, it would finally serve a purpose. I stayed up until dawn, studying the pages with my grandfather's book and a magnifying glass. Using my scanner, I captured detailed, high-resolution photos of each coin, revealing every tiny imperfection on the stamps and showcasing the condition of each coin. I slept in until noon, feeling refreshed, yet eager to check in on work. Upon calling, I learned that Phil Williams, a company executive, had inquired about me. However, with more pressing matters at hand, I didn't dwell on it. Acquiring a safe deposit box from the bank became my next priority. After extensive online research, I was astonished to discover that my pennies were valued at several $1 million, not just due to their age, but also their condition and stamp varieties. It made me understand why criminals went to great lengths to launder money. Converting my coins into cash wouldn't be easy. Over breakfast at IHOP, I noticed another photo in the paper of Marcy and Clayton at an art gallery opening, triggering my next move. Once the safe arrived, I contacted John Smart and asked him to delay any decisions about the land for a few days, which he agreed to. Then, I visited the land trust office to explore making a donation, to which they were enthusiastic. With the final divorce just 4 weeks away, I felt a sense of urgency. The remainder of the day was spent researching coin dealers and auction houses for any signs of trouble. Eventually, I settled on Towers and Burns in New York City, as they seemed equipped to handle controversial sales. Discreetly, I arranged an appointment with them for Monday afternoon to cap off the day. I called the girls and organized lunch together on Monday morning, keeping the morning free. Upon arriving at Towers & Burns, I was impressed by the modern, sophisticated showroom. After providing my name, I was escorted to a less glamorous section of the building. "Welcome to New York, Mr. Simmons. I hear you have some intriguing coins to show us. Is this your first visit to the city?" I took a seat opposite James Towers. Though his face was familiar from ads, he appeared a bit older now. "Thank you. My daughters attend Columbia University, so I've been here before, but never for business. While I don't doubt your expertise in coins, do you have a team member who specializes in early copper coins? Having them present could be beneficial." "I'm not too touchy about it, and I think that's a great idea." He signaled to the intercom. "Murray, could you have Cookson join us in my office?" Maurice Cookson, known for his guides on large cents and half cents, soon entered. He appeared older than his photos, but then again, who doesn't mind looking younger? "I have 12 special coins to sell today. I hope to sell 4 and keep the 5th for your consideration. The rest I'll retain for now. If today goes well, I'll offer those to you as well. I know it sounds incredible, but I believe 6 of them will qualify for conditional census status. Mr. Cookson can confirm whether I'm correct." "Where did these coins originate?" James inquired. "They were handed down to me by my grandfather upon his passing," I responded. "Not to cast doubt, Mr. Simmons, but the story is a bit hard to believe. Can you display what you have?" I laid out 4 photos on the table, each exhibiting both sides of one of the coins I'm offering today. They were enlarged about 5 times their actual size and crystal clear. James and Morris scrutinized each photo carefully for several minutes. "So what's your asking price for these 4? James asked. "A quick glance at recent auctions suggests I could fetch about $1.3 million for them." "I initially thought $1 million, but your figure isn't out of the realm of possibility," Morris remarked. "He really knows his stuff when it comes to pennies," James added. "I'm willing to offer $800,000 for the lot, but under one condition." "What sort of condition are we talking about?" I inquired. "I have a special letter from the Land Trust about donating land. I'd like you to take a look at it, along with an advertisement for John Smart's orchard," I said, handing them over. "I'd like you to purchase this plot of land and donate it to the Madison Land Trust. The price is $600,000. You'll score a hefty tax deduction and earn some serious karma points." "Give us a moment, please," James said, motioning to Morris. They huddled at the far end of the room, deep in conversation, and after a few minutes, Morris stepped out and James returned to the table. "Do you have any coins on you?" he asked. "Yes, and I've got a 5th one I'd like to keep in the mix," I replied. Mr. Cookson reappeared with a purple crown royal bag. "We're willing to honor your terms on the land deal and hope you'll do the same on the coin deal," he said, dumping the bag's contents onto the table. It was a treasure trove of nearly 100 coins, mostly gold, with some silver mixed in. "The retail value of this collection is around $300,000, James explained. "For various reasons, we've had trouble selling them, but you shouldn't have any issues. You've sold coins on eBay before, right?" I nodded. "Your grandfather's coins should fly off the shelves, and we'll both come out ahead," James said with a wink. After some consideration, I agreed. I handed over the 4 pennies to Mr. Towers, and we sealed the deal with handshakes all around. "Now, Mr. Simmons, tell us about this 5th coin," James prompted. I held up the photo and described it as the top-rated 1793 strawberry coin I'd ever seen. "I rated it an 8, but I'm no expert," I added. Both James and Maurice leaned in, eager to see the photo. Morris had a big grin, and James had a twinkle in his eye. "How much?" James asked. "Best offer, as long as you can figure out how to pay me," I replied. "Would you like some coffee, Mr. Simmons?" Letitia, an absolutely stunning woman, asked as she entered the room. "Sure, black's fine," I replied. They left the room. About 30 minutes later, James returned with Letitia. Letitia Rothberg introduced herself and inquired about Mr. Simmons's possession of a passport. He confirmed that he did indeed have one. She then informed him that they would soon be heading to JFK to establish a new offshore bank account for him. Letitia also asked if he had anything for Mr. Towers. Mr. Simmons handed over the 1793 strawberry, which elicited excitement from James. He expressed his gratitude before leaving the room. Although they didn't agree on a price, Towers showed great enthusiasm for the 7 coins. Mr. Towers agreed to hold on to the small bag of coins until Simmons returned. Shortly after, Letitia and Mr. Simmons found themselves seated on a plane headed for the Cayman Islands. She didn't say much during the flight. When we landed, photographers were clamoring to snap her picture. She seemed both irritated and amused by the attention. I was clueless as to why she was such a celebrity. It was my first time flying first class, and it was over in a flash. A bright yellow mini SUV awaited us at the terminal. Letitia wasted no time hopping into the driver's seat, flashing her tanned legs in the process. I couldn't help stealing glances. Feeling a bit flustered, she seemed to find my discomfort amusing. 20 minutes later, we arrived at a mid-sized condo building. Letitia owned the entire building but used the top floor as her personal space. "Care for anything, Mr. Simmons?" she asked as she left the room. Watching her leave was just as captivating as seeing her foot in the terminal. I'm not one to gush over women, but Letitia Rothberg was captivating. We stepped onto a small balcony overlooking the ocean. It was stunning, but the wind was a bit much for my liking. She was probably trying to impress me with the luxurious surroundings, but my mind was more on the new bank account. "You're not much of a talker, Mr. Simmons. Don't you have any questions?" she asked. "It strikes me as odd that someone of your stature would drink beer from a bottle," I remarked. "I'd imagine you sipping champagne or martinis instead." "I usually think it's best to wait, but I suppose you could tell me why we had to come here to open a bank account," I added. "It's a simple, secure place to stash your cash. I think it'll serve you well," she replied. "You've got 7 more coins after all. That still seems like overkill," I admitted. To my relief, we headed back indoors, away from the wind. "Can you handle this?" Letitia suddenly asked, catching me off guard. "I brought you here to be myself for a few days." Her unexpected comment brought a smile to my face. I knew she was joking, but it was a humorous moment nonetheless. She had a great sense of humor, looked stunning, and had a fortune to boot. What more could a guy ask for? "If only I were a decade younger. Teasing an old man won't do any good," I joked, and we both chuckled at the situation. "Come on, Mr. Simmons, let's go grab some fresh lobsters for dinner," she suggested, and we downed the last of our long necks before heading out the door. The restaurant was amazing, but the wine the hostess selected didn't agree with me. I tried to handle it politely, but my discomfort must have been evident. "What's wrong with the wine, Mr. Simmons?" she inquired. "I'm sorry, it's just a reflex. When I was 18, I got sick on cheap white wine, and ever since the smell or taste of it makes me nauseous," I explained. "But don't worry about it. It's good wine." A few minutes later, we were served 2 fresh long necks. Strangely, there wasn't much conversation during the meal. Afterwards, we each had a slice of key lime pie and sipped coffee. "So, tell me about yourself. Are you married? Any kids? What do you do for a living?" she asked, eager to know more about me. "We've got all night, and I'm curious about how we ended up here," she added. "That's quite a few questions," I chuckled. "I have 2 daughters, both studying something related to international banking at Columbia University. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure what they're studying. I just pay the bills." "That's interesting. I actually hold a master's degree from Columbia and occasionally lecture there. I've met both of my daughters," I continued. "Did you see them this morning?" she asked. "We had lunch together. They're not too thrilled when I make them skip class," I replied with a smile. "You must have married early if you have 2 daughters in college," she observed. "Yeah, it does sound like a movie line," I chuckled. I felt comfortable with this Mediterranean beauty. I could have conversed with her for hours. As for me, I'm currently separated from my wife. It feels strange to say, I admitted. She left me for some wealthy wheeler dealer. He's probably into building shopping malls or business complexes, judging by his fancy car and big apartment. She said she's moving on, and the divorce should be finalized in about 4 weeks. "That's a flimsy reason to end a good marriage," she remarked sympathetically. "Yeah, I thought everything was fine, until she met this guy. I guess she was never satisfied with my career choice," I reflected. I had opportunities to advance, but she didn't want to budge. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I thought it was necessary to save the marriage. Now I just feel empty. "And what about you?" I asked, shifting the focus back to her. There was a moment of silence. "How do you tell a beautiful, wealthy, successful woman that you manage a grocery store?" She noticed my discomfort and reassured me, saying, "It's not a big deal. We can discuss it later." No, it's okay. I'm not ashamed of my profession, I reassured her. It's just that managing a supermarket as a grocery manager isn't exactly a glamorous job that impresses the ladies. My daughters don't mind, but my wife often conveniently forgot to mention it in conversations. I could tell it bothered her. Do you find satisfaction in your work? She inquired, as the server brought more coffee and cleared the table. Yeah, I do, and I'm pretty proficient at it, I replied. Mr. Simmons, I know we've just met, but I believe first impressions matter. So what's your initial impression of me? She asked. Her question put me in a bit of a dilemma. If I expressed my genuine thoughts, I might push her away. But if I attempted to flatter her, she'd see through it and perceive me as insincere. What should I do? In summary, I see you as beautiful, intelligent, educated, and confident, I said, noticing a slight smirk on her face as she tilted her head down and looked up at me. I was hoping for honesty, she confessed. I'm sorry, but we were having such a pleasant evening. I didn't want to spoil it, I apologized. Do you truly have such a low opinion of me? She questioned, her tone becoming serious. Maybe that's why your wife left you for another man. If you hadn't always tried to please her, your marriage would have been stronger. Her words stung, but I had to acknowledge there was some truth to them. You use your beauty and charm to achieve your goals. You're accustomed to getting your way, and I sense a hint of entitlement. You play with men, but fear commitment, yet you seem astute with finances, understanding how to spend and invest wisely. If you weren't so determined to prove yourself equal to any man, you might actually make a good mother, I said, feeling uneasy, but also somewhat annoyed by her earlier comment about my marriage. After a moment of silence, they exchanged looks, and she softened her tone, questioning if he genuinely believed she would make a good mother. As they drove back to the condo, the tension dissipated, and the atmosphere lightened. Their night together turned out uneventful due to separate bedrooms, which suited him fine as he hadn't expected anything. The following morning, he woke to find breakfast waiting for him along with a copy of the Wall Street Journal. Enjoying the tranquility on the balcony, he noticed the wind had died down. About 20 minutes later, Letitia joined him, playfully taking a section of the newspaper as they settled in. They quietly read and savored their coffee, as if it were a routine they'd been following for years. Despite their brief acquaintance, everything felt natural and effortless with her. He mentioned without hesitation that his phone didn't work there, and he wanted to call his daughters. Letitia offered me her cell phone and told me it was mine to use. Anxiously, I asked Cindy where she was and if everything was okay. Cindy explained that she was in the Cayman Islands, staying with a friend, and had to use her friend's phone because hers was acting up. I pushed further, mentioning that a picture of her boarding a plane with Letitia Rothberg was shown on TV the previous night, asking what was happening. Cindy responded that Letitia was the friend she mentioned and questioned why it was a big deal. I cautioned Cindy about being cautious and warned her about Letitia Rothberg's reputation as a ruthless person as Letitia passed by with the breakfast tray. I introduced Letitia to Cindy as my daughter and mentioned that Cindy was in New York. Upon hearing Letitia's name, Cindy groaned over the phone, and I could hear her and her sister Sandy discussing something quickly on the other end. Why are you there? How do you know her? Are you coming home? Cindy bombarded me with questions. Before I could answer, Letitia was already reaching for the phone. Hi, Cindy. It's Letitia. Your dad told me about you and your sister. I'll be in New York tomorrow and would love to have lunch with both of you. Where should I pick you up? Of course, I couldn't hear Cindy's response from my end of the conversation. Okay, Cindy, talk to you later. Bye, Letitia said, handing me back my cell phone. Your daughter said goodbye. Looks like we're having lunch tomorrow. I'll be on my best behavior, even if they think I'm a shark, she chuckled, heading to her room. An hour later, we found ourselves at the Federal Reserve Bank of the Cayman Islands. With Letitia guiding me, I established my first offshore bank account. 20 minutes later, I saw that my new account had been credited with $4 million from Towers and Burns. It seemed like a fair price for 215 pennies. After our meal, she arranged for a friend to take us to feed manta rays. Over dinner, I asked about her job at Towers and Burns, and learned that she actually owns 60% of the company. So what else can you tell me about yourself? I prodded, feeling somewhat embarrassed about my lack of knowledge regarding her. I was born and raised in London, my dad's Syrian and my mom's Turkish. I hold an MBA from Columbia University. Relationship-wise, I've been engaged twice but haven't been in anything serious for over 3 years. I've learned not to trust men who show interest in me. Call it cynicism, but I often feel like they have ulterior motives, she shared. That's unfortunate, I responded, feeling a pang of sympathy. I was hoping for a ride back to the condo. Does that mean you don't trust me, you big idiot? She playfully teased. I'm sorry if I seemed insensitive. I didn't mean to. It's just hard for me to relate, I apologized, feeling a bit embarrassed. All right, let's just relax. We have a party to attend. She changed the subject, steering the conversation towards lighter topics. Later that evening, we ended up at a cocktail party in a prestigious hotel. She attracted all the attention, everyone treating her like royalty. Meanwhile, I did my best to blend in, feeling out of place in my New York street clothes. Initially, Letitia felt obliged to stick by my side, but I encouraged her to enjoy herself and let me fade into the background, where I felt more comfortable. However, she kept checking on me throughout the night. I ended up chatting with a couple of Hispanic gentlemen, cattle ranchers from Argentina. Our conversation started with soccer and eventually turned to fishing. Despite my limited knowledge, I tried to keep up, mostly nodding and smiling along. Then the topic shifted to investments when Ramon York brought up his interest in winter wheat. I listened intently as he explained his plans, though I couldn't help but wonder how someone with his apparent wealth could invest in something he seemed to know so little about. My confusion showed on my face. Mr. Simmons, your expression tells me you're not on board with the winter wheat investment idea, Ramon observed, catching me off guard. My attempt to remain unnoticed had failed miserably. I apologize, Ramon. I'm not really savvy when it comes to investing, and this topic is a bit beyond my expertise, I admitted, opting for a casual first-name basis to ease my discomfort. But I have a feeling you've got some thoughts on the matter, Ramon persisted, trapping me into sharing my opinion. Feeling cornered, I mustered a weak smile. I think I need another drink, I deflected, buying myself some time. For the next hour, I listened as an Alabama greengrocer elaborated on the promising winter wheat crop in Alberta and Saskatchewan, countering the poor harvest in the States. His explanation was thorough, but my mind struggled to keep up with the complexities of the discussion. Just when I was running out of witty remarks, Letitia came to my rescue, whisking me away from the intense conversation. As we walked off, she questioned me about the unexpected turn of events. What was that all about, Alan? We were just chatting about food groceries, she remarked, with a hint of amusement, flashing a small smile in my direction. The following morning, we flew back to New York, where a swarm of photographers awaited Letitia's arrival. A courier from Towers and Burns handed me a package containing the coins I had left behind. After bidding Letitia farewell, I made my way to the commuter train terminal, headed back to Huntsville. The divorce proceedings and the sale of the house unfolded according to plan. Phil Williams from the main office had left me multiple messages, urging me to consider relocating to the company's headquarters in New York. This time, I agreed. John, overwhelmed, also reached out, asking for a lunch meeting at work. I tucked myself into my locker, bidding farewell to my colleagues. As I prepared for my upcoming move to a newspaper, I noticed a photo of Clayton and Marcy at a local politician's barbecue, looking like the perfect couple. With 3 weeks left, I spent a whole day scanning and identifying the coins from the bag I brought back from New York. Determined to maximize their value, I decided to list them on eBay as soon as possible. As long as I didn't encounter any shady characters, everything should go smoothly. It took an entire day to create those coin listings, along with preparing envelopes and labels for shipping. All the payments went into my PayPal account and then off to my new offshore bank. With the weekend ahead, I finally had some time to relax. My Friday lunch with John Simard was interesting. He seemed pleased that Clayton was involved, but wasn't happy that I didn't benefit from the deal. Trying to explain it to him would have been a headache. Lunch went well, and as he was leaving, he handed me the deeds to 5 acres of land on the outskirts of town. It seems good deeds do get rewarded. Not long after parting ways with John, my cell phone buzzed. Cindy and Sandy were landing in Nashville in a couple of hours, giving me plenty of time to pick them up. They chose Nashville because the airfare was cheaper than flying into Huntsville, and they were watching their expenses. It was easy to get there and pick them up. Cindy couldn't wait to talk about ILSH. The lecture hall was packed with over 300 students for an advanced corporate finance course. Mid-lecture, the professor paused to introduce Letitia to the class, and she entered confidently. After speaking to the class for about 10 minutes, she invited 2 students to lunch at the Western Hotel. We were shocked when she called out our names. "So, what did you guys think of her?" I asked as we hit the road. "She's amazing, Dad." "How did you even get to meet her?" Cindy blurted out, amazed. "Well, she mentioned she needed a personal assistant and I seemed to fit the bill," I joked, earning a nudge from Sandy. "That's not funny, Dad. Be serious," she scolded. "All right, what did you guys talk about at lunch?" I asked, steering the conversation back. "She was curious about our classes and coursework," Sandy replied with a chuckle. "And she had a lot of questions about you. We got the feeling she's interested in more than just friendship," Cindy added with a sly grin. "But why you, Dad? She could have any guy," Sandy pondered, furrowing her brows. "Yeah, think about it. From where we stand, you're a catch. But Letitia Rothberg doesn't know you like we do, remember?" "Even Mom didn't seem to know you that well," Cindy chimed in, her tone turning serious. The atmosphere between us grew heavy after my unintentional jab about their mother. I hadn't meant to sour the mood or turn them against her. I apologized, feeling the weight of my words. "Your mom's a gem, and I shouldn't have said that." "Don't worry, Dad. We understand more than you realize," Cindy reassured me with a gentle smile. We rode in silence for a while, until just as we crossed into Alabama, Sandy's phone rang. "Hey, yeah, we got here about an hour ago." "Great, no way. That's fantastic news. I'll let him know. Thanks for telling us. Talk to you later." "Bye," Sandy said, ending the call with a grin. Looking in the rearview mirror, I saw Sandy giving Cindy a thumbs up. "What's that about?" I asked, curious. Leaning over the front seat, Sandy spilled the beans. "Guess what, Daddy? Letitia is coming to Huntsville Tuesday morning. She expects you to cover the expenses for the night and serve up breakfast in bed," she exclaimed. I was flattered by the news, but also felt pressure from Letitia, and now my daughters. It all sounded fantastic, and I hoped I was up for the challenge, not just for this one thing. The weekend with the girls went smoothly. They spent Saturday afternoon with their mom, but Clayton was a no-show. I asked them to keep Letitia a secret from their mom. We sorted through all the stuff they wanted to leave at the house, and by the time they left, everything was sorted out. On the drive back to Nashville, I made a promise they made me swear to try to get along with Letitia. When I asked what they meant, Cindy chimed in, "Just don't tick her off. Simple enough." They were excited about my move to town, but I still couldn't understand what Letitia wanted from an old guy who didn't even own a suit that was in style. Back home, I relaxed with a beer and the Sunday paper. No snapshots of Marcy and Clayton this week, but there was a blurb about Keystone Development hitting a snag with local financing. Winter wheat futures were plummeting in value, which caught my interest. I called up Terry Davis and invited him over. It wasn't a fancy lunch, but a couple of cold ones and a chat would suffice. Clayton Manning had a checkered past, to say the least. He'd been on a roller coaster ride of wealth and debt, dodging creditors and friends who lent him money. His latest project was failing, and people who backed him were disappearing. I don't think beer ever tasted so good. Monday morning turned out better than expected. The coins I put up for auction fetched a better price than I had imagined. The appraiser valued the coins at around $300,000. They didn't seem like they'd be worth that much, but they easily could have fetched over $200,000 in just a little over 2 weeks. I'll be free. If you asked me 3 months ago, I'd have thought it was a nightmare. But today, I'm eagerly anticipating it. The folks buying the house had sorted out the financing and were ready to seal the deal. It struck me as funny how comfortable Marcy felt with Clayton, that she didn't need any of our shared stuff. I wondered if she grasped how uncertain her future was. At 3, I had a meeting with the buyers of the house. A fat $200,000 check went straight into my offshore account. They had no objections to me staying in the house for another week, which worked out for both of us. The next morning I got a call. Before I even had my morning coffee, an unknown caller officially informed me that Miss Rothberg would be landing at 10:45 a.m. on Delta Flight 724. I arrived 30 minutes early, feeling a bit nervous. Some paparazzi had caught wind of her arrival and were camping outside the terminal. I tried my best to lay low. I parked in short-term parking, not expecting all this fuss. Instead of waiting for me to pick her up, She chose to walk alongside me behind the car. Naturally, the photographers caught my license plate, and the secret was out. I'm not used to all this attention, but Letitia seemed unfazed by it. She even apologized to me for it. On our way home, I couldn't help but remember how, as she stepped off the plane, I had the urge to kiss her. Silly old man. I felt sheepish about the emptiness of the house. Over the past few months, I'd gotten rid of everything I could. The only things left were the essentials that the new owner had agreed to take over once I left. My guests found my attempts to apologize amusing. There wasn't a crumb in the house, so we swung by Taco Bell for a quick bite, her choice. I promised her some Dreamland ribs for dinner. It was refreshing to be around a woman with a hearty appetite. I expressed my confusion to Letitia about her presence, mentioning my assumption that she would be back to her usual routine. Letitia clarified that her visit was business-related, with a chuckle. She informed me that she had heard about my upcoming move to New York and offered her spare room for me to stay temporarily. She mentioned arranging for a moving truck to help with the relocation. When I asked how she found out about my move, she casually replied that it was her knack to pay attention to details. In a playful manner, I joked about her possibly being in cahoots with my daughters, but acknowledged that it would be hard for me to look sneaky. Despite being caught off guard by her offer, I couldn't find a reason to decline it and agreed to start packing with her. I had imagined she'd be more comfortable in a fancy boardroom or a posh bank, but she seemed content just shooting the breeze with me. Still, I couldn't shake off the slight awkwardness due to our age difference. As we sorted through my belongings, we ended up tossing out more stuff than we kept. She had strong opinions about my closet, and she didn't budge. Despite my pleas for mercy, she promised to take me shopping for some decent clothes once I got settled in New York. Once we finished packing, there were more boxes than would fit in my car, but not quite enough for a moving van. I hoped she had arranged for a small truck. I set aside my laptop and a little inkjet printer to check on an eBay auction. We were just about to sit down for dinner when another surprise popped up. A delivery van pulled up in front of the house. Letitia and I watched as the driver, dressed smartly, hopped out with a clipboard. "Are you Alan Simmons?" he asked. "I've got a delivery for you. Where do you want it?" "What in the world is this?" I muttered, puzzled. "It's for Mr. Ramon Jordan," the driver explained. "Got space in the garage." The spot where Marcy's Volvo used to sit was now vacant. I pointed in that direction and nodded. I caught Letitia covering her mouth, trying to stifle her laughter. I guess she found my confusion amusing. 5 minutes later, I was staring at a sleek orange sports car parked next to my old Volvo. "What in the world is this?" I exclaimed. With a hint of pride, the courier declared, "This here's a 28 Lamborghini Gallardo Spider Superleggera. A model. Ain't she a beauty?" Letitia could hardly contain her giggles. She wasn't causing a scene, but it was evident she was thoroughly enjoying herself. I signed off on the delivery and watched the courier leave in his fancy getup. I had no clue what I'd do with my new gift, but one thing was certain: I wasn't hauling it all the way to New York. Miss Funnypants here can keep her fancy wheels. My guest still had a smile plastered across her face as we drove off. I ordered up a full rack of ribs and a couple of brews. "Care to fill me in on the deal with the car?" I asked, curious. "Ramon. Big on winter wheat. Everyone thought he was nuts as prices started to tank, but he doubled down on contracts, and in less than a week, he raked in over $40 million, she explained. He was pleased with the cash, but the compliments about his clever move made him even happier. "Well, good for Ramon. Hope he didn't drop my name," I remarked. "Apparently he wanted to give you credit, but only if you were cool with it. He thanked me for bringing you to the party and wanted your address. I didn't know he planned to do that, though." As the ribs arrived, I watched Letitia dunk a few into Tabasco sauce before digging in. "Man, I adore that girl." "You know I'll be sending this back tomorrow, right?" I asked. "That's what I figured. No worries. Ramon won't be offended. He would have offered the money outright, but he probably thought you'd decline. That way you'd feel more obliged to keep it. We had to order extra beers because of all that Tabasco. I was feeling good and didn't want the night to end. At that moment, I would have given anything to spend the night with this gorgeous young lady. I envied those smooth, charming guys who could charm any girl into bed in a heartbeat. All I could hope for was a goodnight kiss. We couldn't chat all night, so eventually I had to head home. The next morning was fantastic. Turns out all my worrying was for nothing. As soon as we stepped into the house, Letitia grabbed my hand and led me to the bedroom. Being the gentleman I am, I made sure to tend to her needs first, and in return, I was treated to the best night of passion in my secluded life. Breakfast in bed was simple juice, coffee, and a Danish. "Sorry, it's the best I can do under the circumstances," I apologized. "It's perfect," she assured me, although eating off a tray in bed isn't as comfy as it sounds. After a few laughs and some adjustments, we relocated to the kitchen. "Breakfast in bed sounds fancier than it really is, Letitia," I chuckled. "Not to spoil the mood, but I'm curious why you chose me. I don't have much to offer and you deserve someone great. I've been burned by slick, charming lovers before. I won't fall for that again," she explained. "I get it. You're into me because I'm not a player or an idiot," I replied. She found this amusing and chuckled. She said, "Alan, I was impressed with your deal with James in New York." I replied with a shrug. "Just sold some coins, nothing major." She then added, "I found your plan to buy trust land intriguing." Smirking, I responded, "Me? A philanthropist? Nah. I see myself as a cunning guy who took advantage of a unique situation to mess with his wife's lover." She laughed, and I couldn't help but smile too. I was amazed at her intelligence and how well she hid it. "Was that a mistake on my part?" I asked. "No, Alan, that was brilliant," she reassured me. Her curiosity about me was piqued, and she wanted to learn more. "You couldn't possibly have known what I was up to in New York," I protested. "True. When I found out later," she admitted. "You were checking up on me, weren't you?" I realized I'm not naive. Admittedly, the boost to my self-esteem felt good. Unfortunately, Letitia had an early morning flight back to New York. Saying goodbye was tough, however. She left me feeling content and even entrusted me with the key to her apartment. The dealer couldn't pick up the Lamborghini until the next day, but that was fine since I had no intention of driving it. The movers arrived with a small truck to transport my belongings to New York. Terry Davis called with troubling news about Keystone Development's financial woes. Clayton had lost most of its backers almost overnight, and rumors swirled about missing funds. That evening, my almost ex-wife paid a surprise visit. "So what do I owe this unexpected pleasure?" I inquired. "I need to talk to you about some things," she replied. "I'm leaving in a few days, but I'll help you in any way I can." Noticing the absence of my old Volvo, Marcy questioned the orange car in the garage. "Sorry, Marcy, I sold the Volvo back to the dealer after you said you didn't want it. As for the orange car, it was a gift, but I plan to return it tomorrow," I explained. Marcy was surprised by this term of affection. Curious about the expensive gift, she speculated if it came from my new girlfriend. "No, it was a gesture of gratitude from a cattle rancher I helped," I clarified. As the conversation shifted, Marcy hesitated before asking about the money from the house sale. "It's all gone," I admitted. "You said you didn't want anything, so I used the money to set up my new apartment for the move." Marcy seemed puzzled, but accepted the explanation. When asked about my destination, I disclosed my upcoming move to New York for a new job and a significant raise. However, I chose not to mention my plan to live with Letitia. I wasn't planning on spilling the beans about the Cayman bank account either. "You never mentioned what happened to the apartment?" she queried. "It was just leased. The lease ran out and the owner didn't want to renew it," I clarified. "Where are you living now?" she asked further. "We're staying at the Holiday Inn until Clayton finds us a new place," I informed her. "I understand now," I commented, grasping Marcy's motives for wanting to move into our old house. She seemed a bit puzzled. "I see," she responded, appearing uncertain. It was clear she needed assistance but was hesitant to ask. As the conversation paused, I offered, "Is there anything else I can do for you?" Marcy hesitated before requesting, "Could you give me a ride to the Holiday Inn?" The ride started smoothly, but then Marcy brought up my girlfriend. "Tell me about her," she pressed. "She's not exactly a girlfriend, more like a business partner," I explained. "What kind of business?" she probed. "We're not into any business, to be honest. I'm just a clerk at the grocery store," I admitted. Marcy remained silent, gazing out the window, and muttered, "Rascal," under her breath. At that moment, I had the perfect chance, to my frustration, to let her know how much those newspaper pictures hurt me. But instead, I chose to keep silent and smiled inwardly. Seeing Marcy in distress, I felt a twinge of guilt, but it passed quickly as I dropped her off at the motel entrance. She departed without a backward glance or a goodbye. Despite feeling a pang of regret, there was also a strange sense of satisfaction. Thursday morning brought an unexpected delivery, the final divorce papers. They arrived earlier than expected, but I wasn't complaining. On the front page of the Huntsville paper, there was a photo of Letitia Rothberg arriving at the airport, accompanied by her sincere friend. Each room at the Holiday Inn received a complimentary newspaper, so Marcy would undoubtedly stumble upon it. During breakfast, I emptied the safety deposit box at the bank, ready to move forward. My 7 pennies will definitely come in handy soon. During Letitia's visit, I expected her to inquire about them, but she never brought it up. All our discussions were purely social. Now I'm bringing up the topic of the auction prices. More than half of the coins were sold at that price, so I spent the rest of the day packaging and getting them ready for shipment. The remaining auctions had to close by noon on Friday. If all the PayPal payments go through smoothly, I'll be able to mail out all the coins the same day. Any dubious buyers will have to wait until bright and early on Saturday morning. I hit the road. Most of the money from my PayPal account got transferred to my Cayman account. I kept a small amount on PayPal just in case I wanted to make an impulse purchase. As I was leaving, the buyers of the house arrived, making it a win-win situation for both of us. The drive up north would take about 12 hours without any delays. Letitia was waiting in the apartment and promised to whip up a homemade dinner for my return. I wondered who would be cooking it. It was reassuring to know that I still had what it takes to capture the heart of such a stunning woman. I was confident I could meet all her expectations. Just as I was crossing into Virginia on Interstate 81, Cindy gave me a call. It turns out Clayton Manning had skipped town, leaving Marcy stranded without a car or a place to stay.